Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon and welcome to another edition of TechStrong TV. We have a great lineup of interviews in today's broadcast. Lots of stuff going on. I know we are one day away from the presidential inauguration and we are 2 days away from the Predict 2021 virtual summit. So lots to talk about, lots to think about. But in today's broadcast, we have, as I said before, a great lineup of interviews scheduled for you. We'll get started with an interview between Alan Schimmel and Vic Kelkar, who is the Director of Alliances at GitLab. They have a discussion around a recently announced partnership that partnership is with IBM. And through that partnership, GitLab is going to be part of the Ibm Cloud Packs, which is really a great move for the space in general, the cloud space, and definitely with GitLab. Then after that conversation, Alan has a conversation with Lior Coriat and Scott Turner from Quali. They both talk with Alan about Quali's most recent round of funding and why they're super excited about this particular round, what it means for the company, and whether this actually changes the direction of the company moving forward. So good stuff with that interview. Please do check that one out. After they have that interview, then we have the next installment of our Haunted Hacker podcast, which is moderated by Mike Jones of, he's the host of the Haunted Hacker podcast. He's one of the former co-founders of the hacktivist group Anonymous. And part one of the Haunted Hacker podcast ran on Monday. We have part two today, and then part three will be on Thursday. But we're excited about this new episode and this new offering on TechStrong TV. Mike's got some really interesting friends and some really interesting things to say about cybersecurity. So do check this one out. Definitely gonna be worth your time. After that, we have our usual installment of Something Old. This one comes from the most recent DevOps Experience Virtual Summit. It featured Alex Hidalgo from Noble9 and Mitch Ashley from Accelerated Strategies Group. They talk about SRE and SLOs, bringing resilience to production software. During the discussion, they talk about the site reliability learnings from Amazon and Netflix, and how organizations can apply them to today's world of software. So Alex also delves into SLOs, which are service level objectives for those of you playing at home, which he actually writes about in his new book. So definitely a conversation worth checking out. After our Something Old segment, I come back on with the news headlines for the day. And then after that, I have a great conversation with Katie Griotti, who is she's with the Security Industry Association. They recently launched the Talent Inclusion Mentorship Education program for early and mid-career professionals in the security industry. And so Katie kind of walks me through what that is. Basically, it's a program that is designed to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion and empowerment of underrepresented identities in the security industry. So they have done much to really promote the idea of inclusion and diversity and helping underrepresented populations in cybersecurity move forward in their career paths. And it's a great discussion she and I have. Definitely one worth checking out. After that, webinars preview, as always. And then we have our weekly installment of the Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley comes on and discusses the role of CTO, CIO, and CISO in the era of low code and no code. And this is an especially interesting conversation because the technology behind low code and no code technologies is in a lot of ways kind of turning technology on its head, and as a result is having an impact on the traditional roles of the CISO and the CTO and the CIO. And a lot of organizations as a result are kind of maybe scratching their heads over what they see for those C-level executives moving forward. So Mitch's conversation really focuses on whether low code and no code will actually maybe take those job titles out of play as organizations move forward and maybe adopt more low code and no code strategies into their application development efforts. So really good conversation, really good things to think about. Lots of food for thought there. And yeah, so that's our lineup for today. I am so excited about this lineup of interviews that we have, and I hope you are as well. And we will get things kicked off very, very soon, right after this commercial message.
Greetings, Earth people. The year 2020 has been most illogical. It has taken a worldwide pandemic to stop us from our traveling, from attending our conferences. But that same pandemic has accelerated digital transformation to the highest levels of warp speed. What does 2021 hold in store for us? But we will make our best guess at Predict 2021. Find out our most logical predictions at the 3rd Annual Predict Virtual Summit taking place on January 21st and 22nd. Of the new year. Hear from futurists, leaders, and thinkers in the fields of DevOps, cloud native, cyber, and digital transformation. Register now at predict2021.com to see the already announced lineup. Admission is free, but it is limited. Sponsorships are available. Don't miss out on the most logical look at 2021. Predict 2021. Live long and prosper.
All right, welcome back. First up, we have an interview between Alan Schimmel and Vic Kelkar, who's Director of Alliances at GitLab. They talk about a new alliance that GitLab has that allows its technology to be a part of the IBM Cloud Packs. If you're not familiar with Cloud Packs, they are AI-powered software for the hybrid cloud that can help organizations implement intelligent workflows to accelerate digital transformation, which is so important these days. They are built on the Red Hat OpenShift platform to enable organizations to develop once and deploy anywhere on any cloud. So good stuff. Let's give this interview a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another TechStrong TV segment. My guest for this segment is Vic Kelkar, Director of Alliances at GitLab. Hey Vic, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks for having me, Alan. Good to be here.
That's our pleasure to have you on. You know, Vic, our audience is very, very familiar with GitLab. They need no introduction to our audience. But I think this is the first time you've been on TechStrong TV. So if you don't mind, why don't you give our audience just a little bit of background on your role as Director of Alliances and maybe your background?
Yeah, I'm happy to share that with the audience. So a little bit about myself. At present, at GitLab, I am Director of Alliances. I am focusing on some of the strategic partnerships that are happening with GitLab, and I'm also focusing on, how do we engage the developer community and especially help them on their DevOps journey. So I'm looking after some of the CNCF-based initiatives as well.
Oh, okay, very cool. And of course, so much going on with CNCF, CDF, and the whole Linux Foundation. How long you been with GitLab, Vic?
I'm approaching 1 year. So a fairly new addition to GitLab, but loving every moment of it.
Fantastic. Good to have you. So Vic, some news recently coming out that you're here to talk to us about. I'm going to give you the chance. Share it with our audience. What's happening?
Yeah, I think we are absolutely thrilled and delighted to announce that we have decided to partner up with IBM on an offering for IBM Cloud Packs. So
yep.
If I were to expand a little bit, right, I think both the organizations have a shared goal of expanding and helping customers with their DevOps journey. And I think this is a great fit and a great partnership for both the organizations to help customers achieve their DevOps practices or DevOps objectives within their organization.
Excellent. Let's take this apart a little bit because I think it is big, and I want to make sure people understand. I think first, Vic, we need to look at, let's make sure when we talk about IBM Cloud Pack, for instance, right, which is what you're integrating with, tell our audience, what is the IBM Cloud Pack?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one to kind of, break down. So the idea, the key tenet behind the Cloud Pack ecosystem is IBM is trying to bring best of breeds through this Cloud Pack mechanism into the IBM ecosystem. So they have about 6 Cloud Packs today that focus on different areas. So they have a Cloud Pack for integration. They have a Cloud Pack for networking. They have a Cloud Pack for data. And then there's a Cloud Pack focused on AI operations as well. But the underlying tenet and the underlying focus is IBM wants to bring these solutions to their customers so that they get the best of the industry-leading solutions that are out there in those segments. And we are going to be playing a critical part in as a foundational piece for all of those Cloud Packs through this offering.
So let me see if I could put it in shimmy talk, right? IBM as a company has really, I mean, they're a big company, obviously, right? But they've really focused and shifted, especially with the new CEO, to cloud services, the Red Hat acquisition and everything like that, right? Where they're understanding that today's developers and today's organizations that are developer and software focused really are focusing in on cloud, even if they still have mainframes. It's hybrid cloud, it's both, right? And that the way people are working today is via cloud services. And they've put a lot of effort into making it easier for developers and companies to migrate to cloud and hybrid and so forth. And these cloud packs really kind of represent, for given, like you said, there's one for AI and ML, there's one for networking. For whatever, the functionality you need to make your organization work, there's a cloud pack that is, already made, just add water, if you will, right? And let it grow and it'll help you get there. And I want to emphasize how foundational that is to IBM's strategy going forward. This is how they are reaching their developer. And look, every large organization has some IBM in it, right? One way or another. And now what they're saying is, if you are going to go through the cloud, and we think everyone's going to eventually go through the cloud, GitLab is a great way for you to be able to get to your, do your cloud, whether it's AI, ML, or network or software, what have you. It's sort of foundational, built in across the Cloud Pack ecosystem, right? And, especially if you're doing DevOps, GitOps, whatever you want to call it, CI/CD, and the security aspects of it, GitLab gives you all of this. And so it's built in across that Cloud Pack. So it really goes out to almost the entire IBM customer base.
Yeah, exactly, right? Their CEO, Arvind, talks about hybrid cloud strategy, right? Where you may have assets in your own data center or you may have assets in the cloud, but how do you help them deliver better, secure software faster, right? We at GitLab talk about cycle times, and that's why we think this partnership is great, because they are trying to introduce automation in DevOps practices and DevOps platforms as well. So when you think about this partnership, GitLab is already focusing on cycle times, where we focus on bringing in and delivering efficient and effective software delivery. And that's exactly what IBM is trying to do through the Cloud Pack ecosystem. So this is a great partnership as we look forward to this year and beyond.
Sure. So is this available now, or is it like coming out soon? What's the timeline look like here?
Yeah, we hit general availability as of 9 a.m. Pacific today. So it is available in the IBM catalog today. Customers can start looking into the capabilities that this joint solution offers, and they're ready to kick the tires, so to speak.
Fantastic. Vic, I spent a good part of my career as a VP of business development, doing OEM deals and partnerships and alliances like this. And one of the lessons I learned was that getting the software included is sometimes just half the battle, right? The other half the battle is, how do we get it into the customer's hands? Right? How do we make sure that the organization, in this case IBM, understands how to position the GitLab component, supports people, right? Now GitLab's a pretty big company, but it's not IBM, right? So all of a sudden now you got to support IBM across the board, their whole portfolio, their whole customer, their whole customer base. That's a big job. That's a really, there are very few companies that have IBM customers. How are you going to do it at GitLab?
That's a great question, right? So, the idea of this partnership is, it is giving us access to a broader customer base that IBM may have, right? But the challenge on the other side is, how do we enable IBM to understand the value proposition GitLab brings, right? So we are already working very closely with the IBM team on creating demos and enablement sessions on how to position GitLab, right? It's a single application, that is delivering a DevOps platform, and that is helping with the DevOps automation, challenge most of the organizations are facing. So if you think about it from those terms, it's all about showing them GitLab is able to deliver a secure software without compromising on security or compliance, right? So showing them the benefits that they can achieve around cost optimization, because they don't have to spend too much time putting your CI/CD together. We are presenting a single application as a platform for DevOps for them to adopt, right? So it's going to be an interesting value proposition to drive through a big IBM organization. But I feel very confident we have a very good start. We will start publishing a few videos and a few blog posts on how that integration will look like in the very near future.
Fantastic. So, this is available already. It's going to start. People are able to roll out as of today. Vic, where does it go from here? You think what's next as part of this?
Yeah, so through this partnership, we are trying to position GitLab as the foundational delivery platform. But IBM has quite a bit of products in their portfolio, right? So at the launch, as of today, we have integrations with IBM Z, which is their
great.
mainframe. And we also have integrations with Red Hat OpenShift. So containers to mainframes. Now, obviously, there are a few missing pieces that IBM would like us to integrate. So there's tremendous opportunity for us to start integrating with some of the, premium IBM product portfolios like IBM Watson, AI ML pipelines as another example that we plan to pursue as we move forward in this year.
Exciting stuff, Vic. And I don't know if beyond GitLab, what other kind of best of breed software is packaged in some of these cloud packs? If you know, I don't know if you would know.
No, that's a very good question, right? So GitLab is coming in and is trying to play a very strategic role in the DevOps segment, right, as the underlying platform. But there are other OEM agreements that are in place, and they may revolve around a database, for example. From a networking and monitoring perspective, there are a couple of vendors that are being considered. I think one of them may be an OEM as well. But from an IBM partner strategy, right, they're trying to invite some of the leading industry vendors into their ecosystem so that IBM's customers have the choice that they're looking for.
Agreed. Excellent. And they, one thing about IBM is they're actually very good at this, right? They've always been a good ecosystem. They're always a good player, whether it's in open source, right? They're a great open source and have been even before Red Hat, right? They're always a big open source supporter. They always play good in the community. They play well with their partners, partner ecosystem. So, to me, this is just a win-win. I think really for the IBM customer base, right? These cloud packs now have just a great tool in there. Is it an OEM, by the way, Vic, or is it under the GitLab name?
It is an OEM partnership. So it will be offered up to IBM customers as an IBM product. But the partnership is based on an OEM agreement.
Fantastic. That's really good. Congratulations to GitLab, to everyone from Sid on down. Congratulations to you. It's going to be interesting, because I think Red Hat's great. Don't get me wrong, OpenShift and all that, but they needed something like this in there, right? To kind of foster that software development usage. So I think it's a win-win for everyone, which are always the best kinds of deals to do, right?
Yeah, I would agree, right? And I would also second what you brought up. IBM, has been a very good, in the community. They are, one of the big contributors to the Kubernetes project, and a lot of people may not be aware of that. So, from my perspective, I think this is a great partnership on not only the strategic importance, but we share some of the same goals that we have as we try to help the customer.
Agreed. All right, we're about out of time. Vic Kelkar, Director of Alliance, is here at GitLab, telling us about the new cloud packs from IBM, which have an OEM version of GitLab built into them and really should help jumpstart that. Thanks for being our guest, Vic. Come back and see us again soon, I hope.
Thanks for having me, Alan. I enjoyed the conversation.
All righty. Hey, this is Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with another guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, welcome back. Next up is an interview that Alan has between Lior Coriat and Scott Turner from Quali, which has an infrastructure automation platform. They recently got a round of funding that the company is very excited about. So Lior and Scott talked to Alan about what the latest round of funding means and how they're going to use the money and why investors are so excited. So let's give this a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another episode of TechStrong TV. Really happy to have my next two guests on, and we're going to be breaking some news that just came out this morning. Exciting news, always exciting, but well-deserved. Let me first introduce you to Lior Coriat, CEO at Quali, and Scott Turner, from the marketing. Scott, I don't even know your exact title these days anymore, but
CMO.
CMO at Quali. Scott and I know each other for years from down in the Austin area and stuff. But gentlemen, welcome to TechStrong TV, and thanks for being on with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Guys, before we jump into the big news, our audience is obviously very DevOps, cloud native, cyber, digital transformation based. I think a lot of them have heard of Quali, but not everyone has. So before we get into the news, maybe we could, if you don't mind, Lior, I'm going to ask you as the CEO, it's your job. Give us a little background. What's Quali? What do you guys do, right? Where do you play?
For sure. So first off, Quali is an automation company. What we offer is a platform that simplifies cloud infrastructure and really making it accessible and secure to application development and deployment. At the end of the day, it is to accelerate digital transformation and the development cycles throughout. So we all know that every company today is software company, right? Software is the lifeline of everybody's business. We all choose our banks by the quality of the online services. Every retailer sells online, otherwise they are going out of market. You stream your content, you don't go and rent it anywhere. So it really doesn't matter what industry today you are. Software is really what's your lifeline today, and software obviously has to the market really fast. Even JFrog's title is, release fast or die, and this is super true in these days. And obviously software and data, they need to run on something. This something is the infrastructure, and it could be either the cloud or a private cloud, a public cloud, containers, Kubernetes. It doesn't matter what the technology is. And the challenge is today is that the infrastructure itself becomes really sophisticated, thus complex, thus becomes a bottleneck to really releasing fast. And what Quali does is really allow to automate that layer of infrastructure in a way that is really seamless to the consumer itself. The consumer is either the developer, the tester, the DevOps team, the operation folks. Everybody really today needs to get access to applications and to the infrastructure on which those applications are running, and to do this in an unaided fashion, meaning in a self-service, but it's fully automated and it's secured and governed. So what Quali does is we offer this infrastructure automation at scale service to really allow that to happen. At the end of the day, the reason why our customers are working with us is really because it helps them to focus on their mission and on their job. Infrastructure should be an enabler, shouldn't be in the way. We are making it what it should be and helping them deal with the complexity. So, the CRO can focus on demoing his products and sell. The VP of engineering can focus on releasing fast and in high quality. And the operation guys, they can focus on the quality of service that they deliver and not worry about cloud cost and security.
Yeah, and amen to Alan, to everything Lior just said. Absolutely, we're a digital transformation story, and I would just add that sometimes I'll think of it in very simplistic terms, like an automobile, for instance. And there's this marvelous, complex infrastructure that's very precise and does all these wonderful things. And in this case, it could be under the hood of a car, for instance. And we, the drivers, our application is getting from point A to point B, right? But it doesn't and it shouldn't require that the driver be a mechanical engineer to fully understand all those nuances and the complexity and the configuration and the setup and the maintenance of all that underlying infrastructure. We want it to be there. We want access to it. We want that simple self-service in the form of our car dashboards and all these wonderful things. And we want some controls. We want that brake pedal also in addition to our accelerator. And we want all these wonderful things. And that's the car analogy. And I think that in our case, we're providing that infrastructure automation that the applications teams need. And we're providing that in a simple self-service fashion, the same way that I think of a car with that infrastructure hidden underneath the hood.
Fair enough.
I can maybe also share a little bit more about Quali as a company, because as you said, not everybody knows about us. So we're headquartered out of Austin, Texas, and we have our engineering center in Israel and also development site in the Ukraine. We operate globally, so we have offices again in Austin on the West Coast as well. We have a team on the East Coast here in the US. We have a sales and customer success team in the UK and development centers in Israel and in the Ukraine. Our customers are mainly either mid-market or large enterprises, really across every vertical. So from technology manufacturers, large ISPs, telcos, financial services. 4 out of the large banks here in North America are customers of Quali, as an example. Even the cloud providers themselves are customers of ours, retailers. Again, they all share the same challenges and they all need to accelerate those development processes. And in a way, you could see that Quali really shines when you have a challenge in scale. Because if you're a small company and perhaps you have 5, 10 developers, they can probably also be the cloud experts and the infrastructure experts. But when you have hundreds or thousands of people that you need to serve, and you have the amount of infrastructure is too large for you to just manage it manually by a few folks, then it becomes unscalable to really do it otherwise without really a self-service, but then it has to be governed and automated, right? So this is where we shine. We operate globally. We have customers in all continents, and our really what we have announced today is the C round that is really taking us towards the scale that we want to have as a company. So we have focused in the last couple of years in really solidifying our go-to-market and our offering, and we have enjoyed a very strong growth. While COVID has introduced a lot of challenges for everybody, still the need for digital transformation has just been more pronounced this last year, and that also introduced a lot of demand for solutions like ours and also movement to the cloud. So for us, we definitely see a lot of demand coming in from the market.
Sure. I mean, you know what? A wiser man than me, a mentor of mine once told me that sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. It's good to be both. Yeah. And, if you're a business like Quali, as bad as 2020 was for so many, there's been so much loss around the world and catastrophe and heartache. Digital transformation has been a bright, shining light that's helped us. Where would we be without being able to get our groceries delivered and our e-commerce and everything? We have all of us, right? Scott, that person driving A to B, they don't drive A to B, but they still get their stuff from B because we all have sort of a virtual persona where we're able to exist online. And it's companies like Quali, right, that are helping empower this.
Yeah.
So as I said, being in the right place at the right time, something, but that doesn't happen without understanding where the world is going. And it's funny, I'm doing a presentation I have to record later today for our Predict virtual event, and it's not that digital transformation wasn't happening. Lior, you saw this coming when you started Quali, I'm sure, right? But the acceleration in 2020 is phenomenal. Now, you didn't hint at it. You said that, the news today is around an announcement of a C round of financing. Why don't we focus in on that if you don't mind? Tell us give us some details on this financing round.
This is super exciting, obviously, news for the company. So as we've mentioned, again, not only 2020, but even before, we've enjoyed kind of a very nice growth path for the company. Number of customers, overall ARR, and again, the demand for digital transformation in general, but also solutions that would make it easier and faster for the market. So we were able to first off attract investors that are really interested in this space, and also we wanted to accelerate our growth. So this C round that we've just closed has been led by a couple of large investors. One is Greenfield Partners, and the other one is JVP. The overall amount is $54 million, and this is really going to allow us to accelerate, to expand our account base, again, throughout the mid-market and enterprises, although we have a lot of startups as customers as well, but overall expand globally, add a lot of partnerships. This is a very rich ecosystem in the DevOps space. We definitely want to make sure that we are part of it in a very profound manner. And take a leadership position, because nobody does what we do, and we kind of a layer that is pretty much the glue of all those value streams, if you will, of a pipeline and artifact management and Git, etc., and really accelerate the innovation and grow the quality team. So we plan on almost doubling our engineering team and our operations team and our sales and go to market entirely. And really our mission is to keep on growing over 100% year on year in the next couple of years, thanks to this round.
Yeah, as strange as 2020 was, our growth happily attracted this new investment, and we will absolutely use that to make further improvements and invest in the innovation of our platform, Cloud Shell platform, and to expand our customer base, and as Lior mentioned, invest in new partnerships. And along the way, we're going to be hiring a lot of people. So this is 2021 is going to be an awesome year for us.
Fantastic. Lior, as they say deep down in the heart of Texas in Austin, mazel tov on raising the money. It's an impressive amount. To give our audience a little background, what's the total money into Quali now with this C round?
Together with the C round, it is about 130 million, including the C round. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Congratulations. All kidding aside about Austin, there are plenty of people who say mazel tov in Austin. But anyway. But that's great. And Scott, I hear the enthusiasm in your voice because, as a marketer who now has some resources, right? Let's make Quali a household word out there.
You got it.
Yeah. And, you said something interesting. I think it was Lior, not Scott said. I'm not sure which one of you said it, but that really no one else in the market is doing what Quali's doing.
Yep.
Right. And that's unusual because when you get, in emerging markets like we're in with DevOps and transformation and stuff, usually, it's a copycat. It is. Someone says, oh, that company's doing, we could do that. We could do it better. We could do it cheaper, whatever. And you'll see other companies. Why, Lior? Why do you think we haven't seen people trying to do what Quali's doing?
So this problem is obviously the problem itself of addressing the challenges of infrastructure and how to automate it and then facilitate the business, that's the end goal. That's obviously a problem that a lot of companies are trying to tackle. The main difference is in the approach. While some alternatives to what Quali is doing look at the problem of infrastructure and try to solve it as infrastructure as code, which then would allow you to perhaps code and script your infrastructure, maybe in a very efficient manner. The challenge in that is that it addresses and really caters to a relatively small set of experts. You still, while you can code something, still you need to understand in that something. To code a cloud environment, for example, without going too deep technically, you really need to set up your cloud and your VPC and your security posture and your network and your artifacts and the infrastructure and the VMs or containers and your artifacts, and then the health check and how do you expose it to the outside world? How do you handle secrets? There's so many elements to manage inside. By the way, just between Azure and the AWS, I believe they have more than 4 million SKUs that you can choose out of. This is super complicated, let alone Kubernetes is a very, important technology that a lot of companies are moving towards. This is complicated. So just being able to code something doesn't mean that you can actually do something well and you can actually do something in a secure fashion. But even if you could, the problem is that only a small set of experts can actually do it. And what you see in companies that adopted infrastructure as code is that the ratio of DevOps teams to developers is becoming very close to 1-to-1. And then when you're still a small company, it's manageable. When you become an enterprise or a mid-market, this is not attainable and it's not scalable. And what you need to take that very talented team of DevOps that you have and allow them to service, instead of 100 people, to service 1,000 people very efficiently. You need to be able to manage cloud costs very efficiently. You don't need to think about it. It has to be automatically, inherently in the service that you're getting. So we all like to watch Netflix. None of us wants to code Netflix, right? That's the equivalent. And this is what you would like to do. You would like to have a Netflix team that delivers that experience to all of the audience that consumes that. So that's what Quali does. And in this way, we are unique. So the way we are unique is that those 3 pillars, if you will, of a solution, you still need that automation. And by the way, you could use infrastructure as code as part of that orchestration. But you need to understand it. You need to expose it in a self-service, unaided fashion. This goes to the consumer himself. That's the developer. It's not the IT that need that self-service. It's the actual developer that needs that self-service. And then how do you extend that self-service in a way that is safe and secure? And this is through very strong governance for, again, cost control, security, etc. So if you have all those 3 and you are DevOps oriented, then you're Quali. And again, luckily, we're leading with this approach. It's not that there are no alternatives. Again, infrastructure as code or cloud management platforms, but again, they're not necessarily DevOps oriented. I think at the level of scale that we do.
Yeah, and by the way, I will just add here, Alan, that the 3 elements that Lior mentioned, the cloud and infrastructure automation and orchestration, that governance, those guardrails, and that simple, secure self-service access, that is setting us apart, and it does take us beyond the traditional infrastructure as code players, and it takes us to a point that we call infrastructure automation at scale. And we don't think that you can have DevOps at scale without infrastructure automation at scale.
Agreed. Guys, let me put a hypothesis to you and interested in your thoughts on it. So, as we've all been talking about, 2020 was a year where we saw tremendous advances in digital automation. Or digital transformation, in digital transformation, right? Organizations that were already forward-thinking, that were already undergoing digital transformation, they accelerated. They put the pedal to the metal. They didn't change their plans. They accelerated their plans. They put more money to it now, right? And they've been rewarded handsomely for the most part, right? They've been rewarded handsomely. They haven't died. They've maybe not thrived, but they haven't died. Right? Companies that didn't, many of them have died. They're roadkill, right? But as we come into 2021, I see, I was reading this great report McKinsey did, the McKinsey & Company folks. They have some great stats out there, a survey. Companies that were already accelerating and accelerated through digital transformation in 2020
they're going to continue accelerating, right, through 2021. They see the benefits. They're going to, in essence, double down their bets, right? But we shouldn't forget that there is a probably 30%, 35%, maybe more, of companies that didn't accelerate digital transformation, that had to change their plans because they weren't planning for digital transformation, but they had to do something to stay alive, right? And coming into 2021, they're unsure basically of what the roadmap is, right? Do they double down, or do they hope that we go back to pre-COVID normal? I don't see us going back to a pre-COVID normal, frankly, right? And those companies, they seem to me, Lior and Scott, right? As a marketer, Scott, do you go after that group of companies who are sort of, not sure which way the wind's going to blow, but know they got it, whichever way it blows, they got to follow it?
Yeah.
Or do you just concentrate on those companies who clearly see where they want to go?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would say this, that yeah, we go after those as a marketer, and also they're coming to us. They're coming to us for a couple of reasons. Interesting. We are paid the ultimate compliment recently, or this past year, a number of times where we've had former customers down to the individual person, right, who've maybe left that company, moved on, got a promotion or whatever, or even gotten a promotion within their own organization that said, hey, I used you guys over here. Guess what? It was great having you there. We now need you over here in this new organization. And you're right. I don't think there's going back to the pre-COVID days. I'll also tell you that we've had some, I'll be polite and call it oh no moments, where our customers are calling us saying, oh no, how can I provide remote access to the infrastructure automation that we need? We used to have a company culture where, perhaps if you're working, that you're only working if you're there on premises, on the spot, and what have you, and that can no longer cut it. So we're helping out in those situations as well. The other area, Lior ticked off a number of terrific enterprise-sized customers that we're really excited about, and I would also say that it's now those middle market companies that maybe didn't have the huge resources of the enterprises. Those middle market size companies and e-commerce companies, even smaller banks, companies like this are also coming to us. And so it's a nice thing.
Yeah. We're going to publish very soon a maturity model for DevOps. And when you look at that, you'll see about 4 or 5 stages that companies go through. From a very early stage that is very rigid set of infrastructure that is not automated almost in any way, to something that is on the right-hand side of the spectrum and the scale, that are the most sophisticated companies running on the latest and greatest, cutting blade technology, and they operate like that. If you look at the majority of the market is kind of like, any bulk. And in their DevOps journey, they have to go through these stages. So the majority of the market right now is prime for actually adopting it and adopting automation at scale. So yeah, we don't only go after the ones that are already in the cloud. We actually have a lot of customers that we work with, that we help them in this transformation, because it's also a lot of the practices and how to do this right from the start. You can add to that the fact that a lot of companies modernize their applications and their architecture, so they might as well do it in a modern cloud-based architecture. That's also a good trigger for them to be speaking to us. So what we try to target with our marketing is actually anybody who is either starting to embrace and wants to do this in the right way, or has already embraced cloud but now needs to do this at scale and in a more controlled fashion. This is where we would shine.
Fantastic. Guys, we went past 20 minutes a long time ago. I apologize. But I wanted to, it was a good conversation, and I think there were some good points. Lior, when you come out with this maturity model, you're going to promise to come back and talk to us about it, yes?
Oh, sure. Let's do that.
Okay. I'm going to hold you to that.
Let's do that.
Scott, Great to see you, man. Congratulations to both of you and to everyone at Quali on this great achievement on your C round. But really, as I said earlier about being lucky, better to be lucky than smart, but better to be both. That money doesn't come without great success. You know what I mean? The hardest thing is to get someone to write a check. And if they're willing to write a check, and a big check like that, it's because you're doing something right? So congratulations. Keep up the great work. Come back and visit us soon, yeah?
We will.
Thank you, Alan. Will do.
All right. The York Scott Turner from Quali announcing a big $54 million C round as well. They're empowering digital transformation. Right place to be. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
All right, welcome back. Next up is the latest installment of the Haunted Hacker podcast. This is the second installment. Yesterday, we ran the first installment, and Thursday will be part 3 of our 3-part. So hopefully you had a chance to take a listen to yesterday's and listen to today's. And let's give it a listen to it now.
Yeah, I think you mentioned monitoring and data and like normal behavior versus something abnormal, and I think that we're fighting that in the U.S. as far as privacy goes, but on a government level, because there is access to a lot of that data, and a lot of things could be probably subdued by looking at that data. But there's a fine line between monitoring the data and actions and behaviors and basically breaching privacy. I did a talk with BCS Hertfordshire last week, and that was one of the topics was, so you're working from home in a mixed environment, you have kids, teenagers, whatever. So not only do you have the security of your own system, your own corporate system that you have at home, but then you have to take in consideration all the devices that are attached to that same network, play a huge part in keeping your network safe. Just last week, there was a VPN issue, vulnerability that came out. So, I mean, as we work from home longer through the pandemic, there's going to be more and more exploits driven towards VPN, towards, all kinds of security around working from home. And a lot of people, when I talk to them, I say, what is your company doing as far as helping you secure that environment? And it's a tough question because they don't want to overreach into someone's private life, but that private life has a lot to do with the security of your own company, the data that's being transferred from a corporate laptop through a VPN or whatever. And even cell phones, you're no longer in the office, you're no longer plugging directly into the Ethernet or protected Wi-Fi. You're pretty much at the hands of your employee, right?
Yeah, to an extent, but I think if you're, I hate the term, but I'll use it, but the whole zero trust thing, right? So you can do pretty well, I think, without, if you treat the network and everything else around your device as untrusted, then you can kind of, I think, do a really good job of, if we're pretty, say your company, and you can be fairly strict about you're on a company device or you're VPNing into a Citrix session or a VDI or whatever. But if you're on a company device and we've got appropriate controls on that device, so we're comfortable that device is secure, reasonably secure, we don't need to know that much about the rest of your home network because we're not trusting it. So you have strong monitoring on my work device, which I think is completely fair and appropriate because you're using it for work. And when you don't want us to monitor, you just close the lid and done, right? And we're only monitoring your access to the work systems. And if you want to do a bit of browsing on it, that's fine, but probably be mindful that your work knows what you're browsing. That's what you're. It's a work device. If you imagine, if you go back to pre-computers, you're in a factory working on a factory thing, you wouldn't start thinking, oh, I'm building a car, but I can repurpose this set of tooling to make myself a necklace, would you? That wouldn't even cross your mind. So why do we think the work tool laptop is something I can then do anything I fancy on? It's a work tool, and most work's pretty chilled about what you do, but you just you have to understand that if I'm on, they probably can't necessarily see all the encrypted traffic, or mostly, especially with banking sites and that. So I think most companies, even where they do decrypt the web traffic, are sensible about it. So if you're accessing HSBC or your bank of choice, we won't decrypt that because we trust that to be a banking site. You're not going to exfiltrate much data to your bank. So there's companies will take that risk-based approach, and where your privacy is concerned, they probably won't decrypt all the traffic, and you can probably ask your teams about that. But I think a company has every right to be fairly strong on the monitoring and controls on a work device. And if you've got that in place and you know what's happening with data and you're understanding, okay, the data's coming out of it, but it's got a secure connection to us and it's only connected to and from us, and they can't copy data to other places on the network or to USB or whatever else, I think you can get to a place that's pretty strong without needing to know anything more about their environment, because their stuff can't access your device, your device isn't accessing their stuff. And if they try to, you'll be monitoring that and logging it or whatever else. And then the next level up from that, which still doesn't require any access to their device, is the whole VDI option. So you might do for your super sensitive stuff, so where people are making huge financial transfers or where admins are managing systems, you might have like a management network, say VDI onto that. And then at that point, the only thing in their home is a screen. So unless, apart from filming the screen and photoing the screen, which is always going to be a risk if you're not in the office, and even in the office for most offices, because we can all have phones and you can wear Google Glass or whatever. So most offices aren't strict about phones. Some are, but most aren't, right? So if you then go to that level where you're doing a VDI type solution for admin and sensitive stuff, literally the only thing in your home is a screen. Right. No data ever gets to your home. So at that point, you're like, well, fine, you can do this anywhere as long as you're not letting someone watch the screen. And especially if you're doing it from a work device, so we can be fairly sure that there's no malware on a device doing screen capture. Then I think so I think you can do it really pretty strongly without needing the intrusive level that you were kind of alluding to. Yeah. So I think it's like you're saying, it's that balance, isn't it? You want really strong monitoring on your work data and work devices without intruding the rest of my home life.
Exactly.
I actually think the bigger risk is things like this, phones, because the phone controls, MDM, blah, 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 is nowhere near as good as my laptop. So I can put tools on a laptop that lock it down and data monitoring tools and stuff that will know exactly what you're doing with data. And they work at rootkit kind of level, don't they? So they understand move, copy, delete. They don't understand Word or other stuff. You can't circumvent them by copying stuff from one file to another because it just follows it as a copy process. Right. So you can be really strong monitoring data on a device, but these I don't think we're as good at.
And I don't think we are. So that brings me to a good point. So after we get done with questions for you, I'm actually going to do a demo for exploiting Android phones and gaining access to.
We've just triggered every MDM provider that's going to see this. Like, right. We are as good. We're amazing, and they are good, but I just don't think it's as good. And it may not just be the solutions; it may be the companies. But most people I've spoken to in most companies, a lot of the controls they talk about are laptop-y controls and not phone controls. So I think there is some risk around phones and mobile devices where we're not as strong. Most organizations aren't as strong as they are with laptops and desktop type stuff. Yeah,
I'm actually going to run a malicious APK that has been encrypted and signed. So it looks like it's legit, and the phone allows it and does its update. And then it opens up the phone to me, the microphone, the camera, the GPS location, all the above. But we'll do that later. So does anybody have any questions for Kevin? If you do, put it in the chat and we'll discuss it. So how are you dealing, Kevin, with doing speaking engagements? I know it's been difficult for me because we've had to rely on remote sessions, and the speaking engagements are still coming, but I mean, it's all remote. It's not the same to me. I like being in there with the people.
Yeah, I like the interaction. Although, yeah, I think, yeah, part of me is like quite likes it because I can be super lazy and just do stuff from home. But I think because I'm not doing as much, and I've been a bit kind of the weirdest one was when I had to record something for, and that's so weird. So you sit in your office or your room and you spend like 25 minutes talking at your laptop and then just send them an MP4 file or whatever. And that's I much prefer a discussion like this or like a panel where there's interaction. I'm not a big fan of even talks, right? Because you stand there in front of an audience and talk for 15, 20, 30 minutes and maybe a bit of questions at the end. And you can sort of tell if they're engaged, but especially if it's a bigger one where there's lights and stuff, you can't really see anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got no real idea whether people are sitting there going like, nah, or like, oh, this is really good, and there's no feedback. And I'd much rather completely change what I'm talking about because someone in the audience starts asking questions. So I'd much prefer interaction, almost to the point where I'm a bigger fan of panels and discussions over talks.
Yeah, so I remember one that you and I did together at Barclays, the Barclay high-rise in downtown London. And literally we sat there for a couple of minutes, I think until Eliza actually raised her hand and asked a question. But
that was, I asked a question. That was so weird. Yes, the risk of audience interaction is when I'm like, hey, what do you all think about this? Or what should we do about that? And literally, the audience sat there and it's like, guys, you're all here in your own time to talk about security, and none of you wants to talk or ask questions. So yeah, that was weird. Yeah, Eliza saved us on that one.
Yeah, for real. But then we've had like talks like the conference at NIST, which I thought was really cool. It was a stage environment, but it wasn't like overwhelming. Like there was a lot of interaction, and I think that's where I met you, and I met Greg. I had actually met Greg way before that on the internet, but just didn't know who he was like in person.
Yeah, I think I'm the best. Those kind of the sort of 150 to 300 people size conferences. It's a really good size to have like enough people there, but it's still quite personable. Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I did one recently last year in Egypt. And I did it remote, and it was really quite odd, right? So they took the laptop out to the podium and turned it around. Yeah, it was crazy. It's crazy.
It's some sort of like 80s movie, isn't it? With some sort of like strange robot walking around with your face on.
Yeah.
So I can't remember what it's called. There's a little robot thing that was basically a remote control stand with wheels and an iPad type thing. So if you weren't in the office, you could call into this thing and have your face talking.
So I watched a conference with Snowden, and he had the same thing where he had called in. They had taken that same type of robot with the screen. So I think the more we get stuck in this pandemic and stuck at home, I think more of that technology is going to come out, because it was odd and it was really strange, but it was kind of cool because I didn't have to actually be there. But they put the laptop on the podium and I could see everybody and they could see me on the screen. And I felt like I was there. I felt like I was being taken over by some mechanical device. It was just really odd. But the more I do it, the more I get used to it. And so it's a lot of fun. So Paul has a question. What is a skill you wish you had, but you don't yet have?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I kind of veer between technical skills I don't need, so I'm currently plowing through a Python book. So I still like to play with technical stuff that's totally irrelevant to like what I do, but I like to keep my hand in and learn still. Probably when someone like I'm quite comfortable chatting in front of people, but sometimes someone walks into the board or whatever and they're just like, hey, how's it going? And they've just got this, whatever it is, this thing, and people are like, oh my God, I trust you. Yeah, if I could getting better at that kind of owning the room with people, where I guess it's, because I'm still pretty, I'm only on my second CISO gig, so I'm still pretty junior in terms of chatting to boards and stuff. So having a little bit more of that kind of owning the room rather than feeling like I'm kind of a guest there. I don't know what I don't know. Sorry, Paul, I don't know what you call that, but whatever it is, where you kind of, I not just know I'm good, but I project knowing I'm good. that thing, so you get a bit more confidence. Thanks, man. But yeah, so that's something I'd like more of or be better at. And I think it's easier. Something like this is because I'm pretty confident generally, but it's much easier when if you're there to talk to people or they've asked you to come and talk to them. It's awesome when you're going in front of the board, especially if you've got a slightly adversarial third line team or something, and you know it's going to be a bit of a kind of, they're giving you a bit of a kicking for something that hasn't happened. It's hard to be like, but yeah, and it's hard to not sound, when you're like, but we've done all this awesome work. Look at all this great stuff we've done. It's really hard to project that without coming across a bit defensive. Do you know what I mean? When someone says, "Hey, you copped this up," and you're like, "But yeah, but we did all this." It's how it's getting that across as, "Hey, we actually did an awesome job." That stuff, and having that just be a little bit better at that. I think I'd like to be better at or do more of.
I think that's a really difficult skill to obtain too, because I find myself walking into a room and not wanting to be in a room. But I think that comes along with, so Stu Hurst talked about imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it was his topic for a year or two. I think he's done some other stuff now, but yeah, he talks about that a lot for a while.
Yeah, I think that plays a big part. So your own self-confidence and kind of, it has a lot to do with personality. So salespeople are really good at projecting and coming into a room and taking over a room. But I think the more technical people, that's a skill that we really have to like hone and sharpen. It's not something that we're kind of innately born with.
The weird thing is, salespeople are often the people who know the least. Not knocking them, but they're not necessarily. You can walk in and it's like that thing where you can stand in front of an audience, and if they don't know you're wrong, you can be wrong and talk like you're right, and they won't. A lot of people, if you come across trustworthy, they'll still believe you. It's that kind of that ability, but without being a liar, actually doing it with the real stuff, right?
Yeah. So another one, Mohammed says, are you seeing organizations realizing they need endpoint security now that more people are working from home? So like EDR and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%. I'm a huge fan of endpoint controls. I think it's one of those things where we keep going around in circles, right? If you've been around the industry for a while, it's like, everything was mainframes and everything was desktops and everything was VDI and everything. But so it's kind of, you go in these little cycles, everything gets outsourced, everything gets insourced, everything gets outsourced, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, but I think endpoint controls are super critical. Right? If you want to know what's happening with your data, how do you know that? So it's, you've got a lot of these things and they're easy to put in, right? So you put in the web gateway that does some email and DLP and whatever else, right? And it's great for stuff that goes through it. But once it gets to my machine, you haven't got a clue what's going on. So your network endpoint to start the network gateway has its place, but a lot of people say that, hey, here's your DLP solution. It's like, yeah, but it's not, mate, is it? Because I'm at home and you don't know what's on my laptop. Right. So I think you do need, I think for me, a super big fan of endpoint stuff. I think it's more and more critical. I think you have to find that balance because no one wants 75 agents. So it is how you do the right thing. So like you mentioned, it's probably, like some sort of pretty advanced EDR thing that does your AV and your firewall control and your telemetry and stuff, and some sort of DLP thing. And then maybe a patching or kind of management agent for the sort of normal ops teams and that. But yeah, you definitely need an EDR type thing. And it's got to be much more than traditional AV because they're just pants. Some sort of data management. I hate the term DLP, but yeah, something that data management, data movement controls around what's happening with data, and that's again got to be. I think we need to move away from relying on classification or relying on regex, because classification no one does well everywhere. No. Regex will find. Like if it's a credit card number, it'll find it, but you just put it in 4 different files and your stuff, right? If you say to a regex DLP based solution, give me all the PII, you're just going to get so much stuff. Companies have entire teams, so you have to get more intelligent. I think that's another area we should get better at is DLP. How do you make DLP something that I don't need a DLP team to manage? There's got to be much more intelligent ways of looking at it. Like, that's corporate data. You're trying to move it to a non-corporate location, some stuff like that, but also without being too onerous. So you can go too far the other way with it and say, right, you can't ever copy anything corporate to the web, which then means I want to copy my bio to a speaker's bio page. Mate, you can't copy that. So it's DLP, I think that's somewhere where we need to level up. So if you're anyone out there who does DLP, give me some proper machine learning, clever DLP that will manage my data without me needing a whole team of people and a billion false positives. Yeah. So absolutely. But endpoint controls are super important.
So I was looking at SolarWinds and the whole compromise, and they went after FireEye. and I know what they went after FireEye, but I think that we're going to see a lot in the future, like APTs going after companies like CrowdStrike, right, who have endpoint protection and they're agents on every system. Why would you go after FireEye other than intelligence and some of their clients? But if you really want to do mass damage to a number of systems, go after those CrowdStrikes, go after those McAfees that are endpoint protection. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future. But I think the whole, as we've seen, you often have to read between the lines of these stories. I don't think the people doing this cared at all about getting some of the FireEye tools right, because they were mostly open source and available anyway. So that was a total red herring. It's all using FireEye to look at the Mandiant stuff where they've done investigations for governments and things, right? Yeah. It wasn't FireEye at all. It was the Mandiant side of things I think they're after. Yeah, it was funny because during the riots in DC, they broke into the news feed and quickly said the Department of Justice admitted that their email server had been hacked during SolarWinds, and 3% of the DOJ and FBI emails were leaked. So, I mean, those types of attacks are pretty prevalent as far as APTs going after, government and, Department of Energy and stuff like that. But I think maybe some lone wolf hackers and maybe some hackers for hire will actually go after endpoint. I see that being the future. But companies really need to look at how they deploy their employees at home, working from home, and what exactly they're using to protect that endpoint. Because, during my talk with BCS, I said, you have cell phones in the same room as this corporate laptop. You may have some of these home audio devices like, Alexa or whatever, which I have one sitting right behind me that I'm about to do testing on. But, that mixed behavior and listening to, those devices, listening to what's going on in the room, stuff like that. There was an exploit where they were able to grab the voice recordings from the Alexa devices and actually play them back. So you're on, corporate calls, boardroom calls, whatever, from home, and you have all these devices. Something's listening, or something was listening.
Yeah, I kind of generally advise people turn stuff off. So you turn it, because most of them, I've got a bunch of the Google stuff playing around the house, and but I generally, when I'm on work calls and stuff, they've got, the good thing is it's quite nice, they've all got physical switches. So it's like a physical microphone off switch on them all. So you can whenever you're in the room talking. It's the same as not letting neighbours listen, right? It's just making sure that you have that little bit of, kind of operational awareness. Yeah. But yeah, I think because it's fundamentally they're a good thing. Google doesn't give a fuck what I talk about. In the kitchen is going to hear me and Mira talking about what dinner we're going to have and other random stuff, and dealing, what to do next for the house and what we'll call the dog if we get a dog. Whatever random conversation happens, nothing of any value that can cause any harm, right? And it's so the risk versus the reward of being able to just listen to music everywhere and shout at it when I want to know stuff and whatever else is for me, it's a good fair trade off. But equally, turn it off when you don't want it to listen.
So another question, with the recent events in the US.
I think you missed one.
Oh, I did?
Yeah, it was Manan, just a couple above that, about getting into, do you have any tips for experienced people from non-IT backgrounds looking to get in the cybersecurity industry mid-career? It's pitifully rare to hack the process where recruiters, or just ignore recruiters, right, for a start. I guess for me, it show, I'll jump in, Mike, if you don't mind, and then
go ahead.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's same as almost with the junior stuff, it's show willing. So if you want to get into cyber, don't just come to me saying, hey, I want to work in cyber, and I'm like, well, what have you read? What are you interested in? So do some stuff to get into that. Stuff like, you're doing the right thing, man, and obviously kind of listening to these talks, and Mike's going to shares a lot of expertise. But so listen to talks, go to conferences, which is easier than ever now because they're all virtual, right? So go to some virtual conferences. Read some books or blogs, even if it's just the obvious stuff like Schneier and those Troy Hunt and those kind of stuff, right? It's just read some of the blogs and dark reading, and they're kind of just the news sites to find out a bit about what's going on. So when you come and talk to me, you've got some stuff. I'm like, hey, what is it you're interested in? Well, you're like, well, I had this really interesting talk, and I think I'm interested in the people side of stuff because I love cultural things, or I'd love to learn more about how applications work so I can kind of test them, because in my current career I've got a bit of a reputation for breaking processes and improving them. So you've probably done stuff that relates to what you want to be doing, even if it's not security. And I guess I think it's probably be realistic in terms of if you're fairly mid-successful in your career, while cyber's a fairly good salaried environment, you might have to go to a slightly more junior role if it's your first role, where you can't necessarily go, hey, I'm a senior manager at this, therefore I should be a senior at this. So you might have to be realistic about where you're going to go and move up, like any kind of career change. But yeah, for me, it's showing willing, being engaged, and maybe, and it depends what you want to do. If you know what you want to do, so say you love people stuff, well, you want to go to a culture or an awareness type role, or if you love breaking stuff, maybe a pen testing role, or if you come from an operational background, you love being on the coal face and dealing with issues, maybe a security operations role. So you can kind of maybe have an idea. If you don't have an idea, I would say SecOps is probably the best place to start, because you see a bit of everything. You can get stuck in this stuff, you can understand how stuff works, you're going to deal with incidents, you're going to talk to the pen testers and all the other people in your team, because you're the kind of, the SecOps is like the hub that everyone has to work with, because anytime they need more expertise, you talk to the cloud security team or the AppSec team or whatever. So for me, SecOps is always the go-to. If you haven't got a clear direction, start there and then work out what you love doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so when I started out, there wasn't pen testing when I started hacking and doing stuff like that. The generation I came up in, we actually kind of were like the I guess, the frontiersmen, like creating that path. So the way that I came up, it was basically I stuck with what I felt comfortable with and what I knew. But the problem was that there wasn't a lot of jobs for that. So I got in where I could, and that was in defense. As far as like monitoring and looking at alerts and seeing those different types of attacks, gave me some insight as to where I wanted to go from there. I wanted to be the one that created the attacks and actually carried them out. So I went a different path, which takes me to the next question. Lucas, we did cover people trying to gain access to employees' properties and being targeted to try and gain access. That's going to be a new focus. It's obviously a target.
Yeah. That's a great question, actually.
Yeah.
Because if I can get, and it's, if you're lapsed, especially where you've got people that are admin from home and stuff, it's that if you're known as a high valued target, I guess it comes out of social thing, right? It's the balance of social media. You want to have, I've gone down the route of being super open on LinkedIn because it is what it is. But fundamentally, that does mean I have some more risk because people know what I do and who I work for. But yeah, if you're known as, you're all over the place, but hey, I'm super admin for this bank or whatever, and I can do all this stuff. Yeah, there's a small but realistic chance that someone's going to come in your house and make you do stuff on your computer. It's not something we like to think of, but it could happen. So absolutely. And I think that's where the whole, obviously doesn't help with the individual safety, but it could do. But the whole behavioural and all those kind of things. So if Jane, the admin, suddenly starts doing loads of odd stuff, we're like, oh, that's unusual. Jane's trying to steal data. Jane, but she's really good and she's really trustworthy. She could be, so that's where that intelligence from a logical perspective could protect you physically. Because that's really unusual. Let's make sure she's okay. Anyway, then you either phone her up or get the police there. It's like, it depends how sure you are something's going on. And again, it depends what you have. If you have corporate management, you might even be able to put on the webcam as part of your remote desktop management and see that they've got someone criminal there, and then tell the police there's definitely someone there. So the logical side of things and the intelligence we can gather could actually help protect someone in that circumstance where they can't tell you something's wrong, but they're suddenly doing stuff they shouldn't be.
Yeah. So I'm going to put on a tinfoil hat for a second. Do you think that the push for, quarantine and lockdown and putting people in companies separately and in homes with those same type of devices like cameras and microphones and VoIP phones, do you think that is a way do you think the government uses that as a tool to monitor what's going on? Because I know in the US, they definitely did with XKeyscore, with some of those other projects. But also the CIA had leaked a tool called Weeping Angel, where they would take USBs and physically insert them into smart TVs and take control of the TV and, listen to conversations and watch the video on the camera. Do you think that governments may access those work devices at home and that's another way to kind of get a hook?
Yeah, I guess that question is probably broader, right? Because it's your work device may be, depending on your company, may or may not be the most secure device in the house. So they can access your work device or your personal. Either way, they're in your house, right? But yeah, there's a whole load of conspiracy stuff on this, isn't there? Right? It's, I was listening to something earlier, and it was kind of, if you wanted to make America weak, you're any country but they're Americans talking, and it's like you sent everyone home, you're not letting them train, you're trying to take the guns away, and then there's all these rumors about China giving the soldiers extra stuff to make them stronger and better and whatever else. And it's there's a whole that you go down this whole rabbit hole. What I thought was really interesting there on the conspiracy front was the whole storming of Capitol Hill, right? So your country's entire government is in this building. We won't put many guards around it at a time of political turmoil. I'm like, that even though I'm not a conspiracy theorist, that rang a bunch of alarm bells. How on earth did a relatively small, compared to some kind of things, number of people manage to storm the government's house in a country where you have a ginormous army and lots of guns?
And it's funny you say that, because they had called up the National Guard 3 days before and put them on alert. And then there's another video where when the crowds were coming to the Capitol, police were opening barriers, waving people in, like, come on, come on. And it's sad that the U.S. has got to that point. But, with all the things that have gone on with the election and all the things that have gone on with solar winds and just a multiple kind of like a triad of effects against, our infrastructure. I think we're just seeing the very beginning of it. And I think that a lot of things that used to be conspiracy are kind of showing themselves as to be like practical operations that are actually going on. The more information that gets leaked. And, we had a bombing here in Nashville a couple hours away that knocked out our internet completely. Like, I haven't had Wi-Fi other than my phone. We're actually doing this on a hotspot on my phone since Christmas Day, and it's a nightmare. But another thing, that goes back to the whole conspiracy theory, right? A guy blows himself up because he's afraid of 5G. I mean, come on, they've already proven over and over again that 5G doesn't affect the body the way everybody says it does. But the turmoil and the tension, pandemic, political issues, the economy, I think are all like a perfect storm to really play havoc on operations of companies and connections across the world with the internet. And I think it's only going to get worse from here. So does anybody else have any questions for Kevin?
There's what advice would you give yourself 10 years ago?
Oh, that's a nightmare.
That's a super hard one, right? It's probably to dick around less, to be honest. So, although that was probably 20 years ago. But yeah, so I've kind of got where I'll be roughly where I want to be generally, nice and fairly good. Probably non-career advice is don't have a kid with a woman you're not going to stay with. Because I love my little girl, but my ex-partner's a bit of a nightmare. Just in terms of having to, she's fine, she's a good mum and everything, but it's just I have to fight constantly to see my daughter. So so that's probably advice. But I don't know how you do that, because you never know how these things are going to work out. Career-wise, I don't know. It's really hard, because part of me is would have been knuckle down. Because I spent my 20s. I'm a relatively clever dude. Luckily, I'm lucky, so I spent my 20s coasting pretty hard. I did all right in my career, but I could probably have got to where I am 5 years earlier if I'd been focus, I want to do this and blah, blah, blah. But then equally, I had a lot of fun, and it gave me a whole variety of roles, which probably helps me be good at what I do, because I've got such a broad background. So it's a super hard one, because you never know, give someone a bit of advice and they go down this rabbit hole and end up miserable or end up amazing. And I'm reading this really interesting, just literally started a really interesting book. I think it's called Dark Matter. I'll share it with you. It's a fiction book. Mira, my partner, got me a book subscription where every month I get sent a random book based on I gave them some likes and ideas, but I've read loads of interesting books. And this guy, I'm not only about 50 pages in, but basically he was a super, super hardcore scientist that was going to win Nobel Prize stuff. But then he met his wife and had a kid and is super happy. So kind of ended up still being really good, but kind of lecturing. And then he went to a bar to congratulate his old colleague who had won all these prizes, stuff he would have done. And he was totally cool with it. But then as he was leaving the bar, someone kidnapped him and did something weird to him. And then he woke up in this room, and he's now the guy, he had to run away and run home from this place where all these people were trying to do tests on him. And he's found out he's still the same person, but he's in this super cool house and everything's pristine and perfect. And he's got these awards for this crazy science he's done. and all of this stuff. So he's got everything he thought he would have wanted, but he hasn't got the kid and the life. And I think, I'm guessing, so I'm not read the rest of it, I think it's going to end up with kind of exploring which do you want. And I've thought about that myself. You see these people who are like super, super amazing at something, but how much do you have to give up to be super amazing at it? So would I want to be the best at something in the world, but not have the love of my life and not have my amazing daughter and friends and, whatever that you get from not having that and being able to do sports? So I do a lot of physical sport, and I do sports stuff as well. If I didn't have time for all of that, but I would be the grand master at something. So I think it's a really, really hard one. So a bit of waffle, but fundamentally, probably just keep doing what I was doing and maybe knuckle down a little bit harder so I got here a bit quicker. But my advice to everyone is do a lot of stuff. And same for my daughter. I did a little soppy Instagram post about it the other day, but the best thing we can do for our kids and for ourselves is get them to try a lot of stuff. So when your kids, and same for you, go, right, I really want to be shit hot at pen testing, or I want to be a CISO, or I want to be whatever, it's because you've done a bunch of stuff and this is the best thing, this is what you love, as opposed to this is all I've ever done, so I probably better carry on doing it. So I'm trying to get, so my little girl, we've done, I got her a workbench as well as a kitchen and a little plastic workbench, and we'll do loads of drawing and cuddling and baking, but also I got her trying to pick up, see how heavy, you've got these slam balls that you pick up and throw on the floor, so seeing how heavy a slam ball she could pick up the other day, so she does some physical stuff, and she's really cool because she's like, I can't do it, Daddy, I can't do it, and she's like, if I can't do it now, I'll come back later, and then she did it, and it was amazing before. So try lots of things, and that way you'll have a really broad experience. There's a cool book called Range about this, which is basically people with range will be much more successful in this world than people who focus too much in the long run.
Yeah,
sorry, I tend to waffle a bit, but
I completely agree with that. So I've done like a ton of things like boxing and traveling and hacking. All of those play like a part in your entire being, the way you look at your current job, because you have vast, like multiple life experiences, right? If I was to give myself advice 10 years ago, one would be, don't be such a jackass.
That's my advice to me 10 years ago.
2, don't piss off the government. And 3, stay true to what you believe. I think that if I would have stayed the course, my career is actually, a lot of people ask me how long I've been in the industry and when did my career start. My real career didn't start until, probably 10 years ago, maybe. And I spent a lot of time in my early 20s just traveling and experiencing different places and different life. Lived in the Northwest, lived in Holland, all over the place. But I think that all plays a part into how I look at people, how I understand the world, and really just like taking a look at myself. I think that a lot of people in their 20s and younger don't do a lot of inflection. They don't do a lot of introspect to like take a minute out of their day and like just kind of think about where they're heading and what they're doing. If I would have done that, I guess about 15, 20 years ago, I may not be in the same position I'm in now. But, I don't regret any of it. I've learned a lot, and I've been able to help a ton of people. But yeah, like there are some things out there, and I'm sure everybody on this podcast can attest to, there are things that they wish they hadn't been a part of. I know for a fact a couple of people. Go ahead.
I guess that point, though, isn't it? If you now make a part of your career is talking about what you did and helping people get on the straight and narrow. So if you'd never done that, you might not be helping as many people because you wouldn't have the experience to help kids and stuff get on the straight and narrow, right? So while you say you shouldn't do that, maybe you should have done to make you the Mike you are today, right?
Yeah, I would have liked to hold on to my passport, though.
Yeah, maybe piss governments off a little bit, but not too much.
Right. So that's about it, man.
There's one last question you've missed, I think.
Where?
Traditional versus cloud versus hybrid.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
You can take that one.
I don't think there's a right answer, right? So I think you can secure cloud, you can secure hybrid, you can secure both. If you're in a bit of both. A lot of companies, I think most companies, even if they're not all in or a bit, everyone's using something cloud, whether it's a bit of SaaS, whether it's a bit of Office 365, whatever. So pretty much every company's using some cloud stuff. And it's always about doing it right. there's different paradigms. I think one of the worst things you can do though is when you are in that halfway house on migrating to cloud is do in the cloud what you did on-prem, because it's different. The security principle the same, like no way you do it with protect your data, patch your shit, but fundamentally the tools available to monitor and protect a cloud solution, especially looking at infrastructure, AWS, Google, are very different to what you do in your data centers, and don't try and do the same thing. Try and make sure you make the best of both. That's the only thing I would say.
Yeah, and I would be careful with using Office 365 because the SolarWinds attack also focused on Office 365. So with that, if you guys have any more questions for Kevin, you have my email address and I can definitely get those over to him. I'm going to try this demo. This is the first time we've done a live demo without like me recording a video and actually doing it beforehand. So I'm hoping it doesn't completely fail. But what we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys how I exploit Android phones. This kind of goes back to the whole working from home and that environment. So give me just a second, Kevin, if anybody has any more questions, give me.
Yeah, man, I'm around. Ping me anytime.
Yeah. Give me about 2 minutes and I will start the web share so you guys can see the screen share so you guys can see what I'm doing. All right. So, sharing. So actually right now we're gonna, I've actually stopped the recording so you guys can do whatever you want to. And I'm going to stop that share and share something else. Let's see. All right, can everybody see that screen? Yes, no, maybe. Okay, good. So I've already set up Metasploit. I've already created my APKs. And we're going to, yeah, there we go. I'm going to set up a listener. If I can get over to the other one, there we go. So what I've done, you'll see that I've created an APK. The one that I've created is Cyberpunk 2077, popular game. People are looking for mobile versions, I'm sure. And the way that I run this exploit, if I was to do it maliciously, right, which we won't talk about that because that's in my past. But I would advertise this, or I'd build it into a website, or really push this out to open forums, Reddit, whatever. And I would host this on something like AWS or a machine that I've taken control of remotely. And so with my cell phone, I'm actually going to grab that APK and execute it right now. So you can see the effects and what happens once you do that. And I've actually ran this APK through an encryption device to kind of hide it and sign because the big thing is being able to sign the APK to make it look legit. So it's got a certificate. The cell phone obviously didn't stop the exploit or the APK. So at this point, I'm in the cell phone with this interpreter session. And so let's take a look at what we can do. So all of these, all the commands that are listed as far as, what you can do with a cell phone, screenshot, screen share. You can go actually into the file system. You can dump logs. You can dump SMS messages, phone calls, whatnot. So right now, I'm going to try this with this window with a share. I can't promise it's going to work because it's video, but I'm going to stream the camera from the phone, which is not looking. There we go. It's very slow because I'm on a Wi-Fi that is a hotspot, but you can see what it can do. Given a better connection, whatnot, you could actually take a look at what was going on. So I'll stop that. Hopefully. There we go. All right. So another thing you can do is geolocate. So with this function, you can set the geolocate to pull however many seconds or minutes or hours you want. So this comes in handy maybe if you exploit somebody's phone and you want to take a look at where they're going and kind of map it out, right? I'm going to do this, and it's going to give away my location. But at this point, everybody knows where I'm at anyways. So when you do the geolocate, it'll actually give you the lat and long. And if you have a Google API key, you can actually map that out. So imagine you run that, you pull it for every 30 seconds or whatever, and you can map out the direction and exactly where they're at. So let's do, let's do dump SMS. Let's look at some of the messages that are on that phone. So it saved it, and let's go take a look at those SMSs. This is one of my favorite exploits, and it's one of my favorite tools to use as far as breaking into stuff. So let's take a look. So there you go. So incoming, of course, if this is an old phone, I have something from the NHS. I'm sure they're not too happy with me. And AT&T talking about COVID and all that good stuff. So let's go back to Interpreter. Let's take a look at some other stuff that we have. You have the dump SMS, you have the call log. Let's take a look at the call log. So we have the call log, copy and paste, and take a look at the details. Hopefully I didn't call anybody important. So yeah, it looks like I called myself the haunted. So there's tons of stuff that you can do with this, right? And I'm not going to tell you how to actually take this APK and put it through some encryption and add certificates. It's a little complex, but on top of that, I really don't want to be responsible for a bunch of people from this podcast going out and exploiting people's phones and it coming back to me. But you can also take screenshots. You can take, you can listen to their microphone for X amount of seconds or however long you want to. You can play an audio file to that phone, which I thought was really cool, which, if you think about it, you spread this exploit over a number of phones, and you can broadcast a WAV file to all your targets, which can be kind of haunting, if you will. But so I ran this before and actually did a, kind of a test and to see who would actually download the APK. I put it in a forum, and it wasn't a malicious APK, but it was just an APK to see how many people had actually hit on it. And we set up a machine and hosted it, and it was insane. Like every 5 seconds I was getting a hit. And, think about that as far as targets that are being exploited. And you could possibly own, an entire, a good majority of a service provider network and their phones just based on one APK that gets put on a website and people download. You can also monitor their screen with screen shares and stuff like that. The file system is very interesting. So once you get into the file system, you can go into their photos. You can go into, and there's actually a thing here for the contact list, which I thought was really cool. But you don't necessarily have to use an interpreter to do this. I would suggest that you guys take a look at different tools that you can use, different ways you can wrap the APK. So the big thing about the APK, so let's say you want to host this in like the Google Play Store. The Google Play Store looks for legitimacy of the file, right? They'll take a look at the file, look and see if it's signed by the programmer or the producer of the file, and look at that certificate, make sure it's legit. So there's several different tools out there that you can do this with and make it look legitimate and really cause a lot of damage. So in pen testing, we don't normally use these types of devices unless, they're asking for, a complete pen test with, we want to test people's cell phones, company phones, whatnot, see if they actually are vulnerable. And I can tell you that every Android device that I've tried this on has not stopped it. And it's because of the way that I've wrapped the APK and had it signed with an encryption key, and the key store is legit. So it's completely effective. The only thing you have to be careful for is once they grab the APK, making it persistent, right? So let's say they lose their internet connection or they shut down their phone. You want to build this into the Android operating system as something that's persistent. And I won't go into that because, again, it's probably a little bit too much information. But persistence is key. Complete access is key. You can actually upload files to the phone, whether it be malware, ransomware, whatever. You can upload it to the phone. You can force the phone to accept other APKs, other malicious APKs. So you kind of get an idea there. I know we tried to go over this a couple of weeks ago, and because of different reasons, it wasn't working. But now you get the gist of what I was talking about then. If you guys have any questions about how to operate this, or build the APK, how I built the APK, and what I use to wrap it with, I can probably give you a little bit of limited information if you ask, but I'm not going to go into that here because it's probably above most people's heads. So with that, do you guys have any questions as far as the Android hacking and stuff like that? And I'm going to go ahead and unmute, ask everybody to unmute and give you guys rights to do your video.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, welcome back. In today's Something Old segment, we have a recent conversation between Alex Hidalgo from Noble 9 and Mitch Ashley from ASG from the DevOps Experience Virtual Summit. They talk about SRE and SLOs, bringing resilience to production software. Great conversation, so let's give it a listen.
Well, welcome, everyone. Welcome to the SRE and SLOs. Bringing resilience to production. My name is Mitch Ashley. I'm CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group, and I'm joined by a very special speaker, expert, very knowledgeable on this topic, Alex Hidalgo. Alex, welcome.
Thanks, Mitch. Happy to be here.
Great to be talking with you and being part of the DevOps experience, and joined by, I'm sure, some really great people. Let's first start out. I know a little bit of your background. You were with Google, I guess, about 10 years ago, really kind of honed your craft there in SRE and SLOs, and then worked at Squarespace for a couple of years, applying SLO approach, and that got you started on writing a book, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But tell us about your journey. How did this become such a big passion of yours?
So my entire kind of career arc has been interesting. I did not go to college right out of high school. I figured I had the requisite computer chops to get some kind of computer-related job, and I was right. I got hired at the Department of Energy doing network security work, and I absolutely hated it. And I thought at the time it's because computers weren't meant to be a job for me. They were meant to be a hobby. And so I left the field entirely, and that's when I went to college, and that's where I spent years and years doing work. Like I sold furniture, and I worked in a warehouse, and I worked in restaurants. I worked behind the bar. I worked in kitchens. I did all sorts of different service work, and I moved to New York City at kind of the height of the last recession back in 2009, and I had trouble finding a job because, well, it was a recession and no one was hiring. So I thought, well, I can probably do that computer stuff still. Like, it always remained a hobby. I was always still kind of coding on the side, and like little projects here or there. And the very first tech job I applied to, I got hired. And that's where I learned, actually, I do like working with computers. It was working for the government that was not really my cup of tea. And then, yeah, fast forward a few years later, and I'm working for Google, and it's really where the concept of using SLOs, at least in the way we talk about them today, was really kind of invented. And what spoke to me is that there's a few primary kind of background rules to service level objectives. One is think about the user first, think about the customer. And my years and years and years in service and various customer service kind of jobs really had already ingrained that in me. And that's something I really, really cared about is make other people happy. And the other thing is you can't be perfect. You should aim to be a certain amount of perfect because you're never going to hit 100%. And I remember the first time I learned about that, I thought about, wow, when I used to be a server, I had goals, right? Like I had targets I was trying to reach, because otherwise you have unhappy customers and then you don't get as good of a tip and you make less money in the industry that way. And so I had these little rules in my head. I try to greet every table within 2 minutes. I try to get them their drinks within 5. And I'd have this mental counter going on, especially on really busy Friday nights. And I also knew, however, if I didn't greet every single customer within 2 minutes, they'd still be okay as long as I greeted enough of them. So enough of my tips were good, et cetera, et cetera. And that was just something I kind of developed in my own head that I realized that's a service level objective. I had an objective for the kind of service I was trying to provide. And if I missed it sometimes, that was fine. If I missed it too often, now that was a problem. And that's exactly what SLOs are. They're just more mathematically intense and quantified in a different way. And they apply to computer services that sometimes have hundreds of thousands of users all across the planet, but the concepts are the same. Think about your users and be good enough, and don't try to kill yourself trying to be too good.
I appreciate all that you're saying about this. Let's back up for a minute and talk about SRE and then kind of how SLO fits into that. I think sort of the working definition, meaning there's often not a lot behind it, is give somebody who knows how to write or program a computer and put it in operations and make things better. A pretty crude definition, but put more meat on the bone for us, for folks that don't have a good grasp of what SRE is.
So in my opinion, the way you formulate it there, that's exactly how it was originally expressed. That's how it was originally defined at Google. 16, 17 years ago now. But I believe the profession has really grown quite a bit and has changed quite a bit. And in my opinion, the most important part of what SRE do is they make good data-driven decisions. They collect data, they examine this data, they make a decision based upon the examination of the data, and then they go back and they measure some more. And then that just kind of repeats over and over and over again. And now sometimes that involves writing software, for sure, absolutely. And sometimes it involves purely operational tasks. It very often involves, social-human things where you need to go out and help convince people. I often tell people a good SRE is a good marketer. If you cannot go around and sell people on new ways of doing things, I don't know how successful you're always going to be. So there's a lot to be said there, but I do think that you need someone on your SRE team who can code, and I do think it's a big part of it. But I'm not sure in 2020 for every organization if it truly still means the original Google definition, which is take software engineers and ask them to solve operational problems.
As you describe it as marketing, it's almost the skill of persuasion, right? You want to advocate for a problem that we want to solve a certain way, which may have implications to changes in how we operate or processes or whatever it might be. And, it's more just it's getting people behind the idea to help implement that change.
Sure. Yeah. I don't mean marketing in some kind of sleazy salesman way where you're trying to pull a fast one on someone. It's not, selling snake oil, but you need to know how to go to people and how to convince people. You need to know how to tell stories. Narratives, in my opinion, are often more important than just pure hard raw data. People like to listen to, hey, when we changed this process, our team was happier because we had fewer pages. That's much more convincing to people than just giving them a spreadsheet and saying like, look, page count went down, people love that human element to it. And those are just some simple little things you can do to help explain yourself better. Like, we're storytellers. And that's really what I kind of mean with being a marketer, knowing how to tell stories and knowing who to tell those stories to.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you if SRE is something new to you, or it's new to your organization, maybe you're developing your skills in that. What's the best way to go about it? I mean, sometimes you walk into an organization and say, let's look for the biggest issue that we can have the most impact the quickest, right? Just to make an impact and make things better. But I think you want to be more systematic than that. How do you approach learning the skills of being an SRE, and how do you approach bringing that into a company? Two kind of tough issues and not easy to do.
They're not easy from the ground up. As with anything, having mentors and having people who've been there before, having people to bounce ideas off of, that's always much easier. So if we're talking about learning how to SRE within an established, healthy SRE organization, it's just be humble, listen to those who have been doing this for a long time, and make sure you take it slow. Don't let yourself get caught up in imposter syndrome. Don't worry if you don't understand everything at first. That's fine. No one ever does, even if some people pretend to. But if you're building a new org, or you're being asked to suddenly become SRE and there aren't other SRE at your organization to look to for guidance, I would say that, take it slow, take some deep breaths. There's nothing complicated. Sometimes the discipline is seen as this, you have to be a master of all trades and you have to know so many different things. And, oh God, I've never coded. I'm just a systems person, or I've never touched a system. I'm just a coding person. These things are all so interrelated. You just may not know. And that's totally fine. Give yourself time to learn, give your organization time to learn. There are tons of great resources out there, from, like the Google Books to a million blog posts to, I cannot tell you how many amazing senior SRE have public office hours, even, that you can just go schedule some time and ask some questions, and don't be afraid to do that. Much like DevOps, SRE culturally is built entirely around people. We want to help each other. We want to be there for each other. And I think that, don't hesitate to reach out. Ask questions online, on Twitter, find people. They'll be more than happy to help you if you really feel like you're stuck.
It's amazing the amount of resources available today compared to when it wasn't brand new 10 years ago, but it's certainly advanced in that relatively short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. When I started as an SRE at Google, I didn't even really know what it was. Because I was at a company and I was acquired, and at that company we were doing DevOps. We in the sense that we were part of the chef community and went to ChefConf, which is probably that's what DevOps meant to me. And then something I was at Google, and my title was SRE. But I was still maintaining the same systems, right? It took us several years to actually integrate everything and for me to actually join an actual SRE team, let's say. And so, it took me years to really pick up on what the discipline actually is. And that's totally fine. But as you said, there weren't really many resources out about SRE specifically, because at the time, Google was still very secretive. The Google post SRE book versus pre, the Google that is pushing their cloud product versus the one that wasn't. They're very different companies in terms of what they talk about externally, and SRE is definitely a huge part of that.
Talk a little bit about the intersection of you as an individual, maybe wanting to do SRE, and talking to management. Let's say within an operations group, we want to bring this in. We'd like to start doing SRE, or maybe take our SRE that we already active in and take it to the next level. What are the things that are really convincing to someone in a management role about SRE and why they want to sponsor, take on, support that kind of activity?
Well, I think first off, there's just the fact that it is such a hot buzzword that I feel like a lot of leaders want it without even knowing what it is.
Yeah, the shiny object syndrome.
Right. So that's just the purely practical answer, is that you may not have to do much convincing, maybe not for the right reasons, but there's always a chance you may not have to do a bunch of convincing because your leadership may kind of want it anyway, because, all their other C-level pals have this at their organizations and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of a non-answer, but I think probably kind of true in some situations. But I think the primary motivating factor is that site reliability, focusing on the reliability of your services, focusing on your services doing what your users need them to do, focusing on what your customers need. That's really what it's all about. The way you go about it, there's many different ways. But no matter what, there's no definition of SRE I can think of that doesn't involve making sure things are better for users and therefore customers. And while I often approach it from the aspect that I want people to be happy, because when users are happier, that often means your services are running better, which often means engineers aren't getting paid as much. It's not a one-to-one, correlation there, of course. But for leadership, just explain it that probably means more money. That probably means a better bottom line. Right? If we have happier customers and our product is running better, that's better for the business. And if that's what you care about, then that part's true too. It's not what I personally generally focus on. Just not in my brain, but the two go hand in hand.
It's funny you mentioned the idea of if they're already interested, take advantage of that, right? There's something to say for take advantage of momentum and take advantage of what's natural to the organization. If they're very numbers driven, metrics driven, then talk about that. Use that as a way to get there. Or if they're already sort of convinced, maybe you don't know what it is, help them learn what it is by doing it. Speaking of metrics, let's go back to SLOs and talk about how service level objectives fit within the context of SRE. Do you have to be doing SRE to do SLOs? Is it better to do SRE with SLOs? How do the two relate? How much dependency is there?
So the original story, and I want to preface this with, I don't think this is entirely true anymore, but the story about how the concept of SLOs became so tied to SRE was the idea that SLOs let you set a target percentage, right? You want to say, we want to be reliable 99% of the time. And that implies we're okay if we're not reliable 1% of the time. And, it's acknowledging failure, embracing risk. It's fine. Things happen and we're cool with that. And the original idea was, okay, well, now you have this 1% of budget of failures that you can have occur before things are too bad. And as long as you don't exceed that 1%, ship more features, right? Like that was the idea. Keep the development teams, keep the product teams happy because they can ship features to their heart's content because that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to ship new features for customers, keep those customers happy. But if you exceeded that budget, the original idea was, okay, well, now you stop. No more features. We're focusing on reliability work. We're going to pay down some tech debt, things like that. Now, I preface that with, I don't know if that's totally true anymore, because I think there are actually many more better things you may be able to do with that budget decision. But it is still true that number, if you can have a meaningful SLO, your adherence to it can still help you make very important decisions. Now, sometimes that decision is, let's hold off on that feature. Let's hold off on a bunch of code changes. Maybe let's take a step back and look at some of our debt, and maybe we should finally spend time this quarter on our new sharding setup to make things more reliable instead of this other thing, But it also it lets you communicate things better internally to other teams, to leadership. It's a very powerful set of numbers you can use to make many different decisions. And as I said earlier, when you asked me to describe SRE, that's what I think SRE in 2020 really is. It's someone who measures and uses that data to make the best decisions they can. And I always use the term measure very purposefully, because I don't mean collect, right? I don't mean just metrics. I don't mean just the time series that I can get off my databases and, like my services, and that those are just numbers. You're just taking them in. You need to measure. You need to do this with purpose. The data that you're looking at can't just be raw. You need to be transforming it and turning it into something useful. When you bake a cake, you don't just put all the ingredients together. You have to measure them, or you're not going to end up with a very successful cake. And the same thing, when you're thinking about reliability, you can't just grab a whole bunch of data. You need to be measuring that data. And that's kind of what SLOs and error budgets really give you. They give you, it starts off with what's often a metric, your service level indicator, but then you turn it into more meaningful data by setting an SLO target and measuring that target over time with error budgets. And it's just one of many different numbers, many different measurements that SRE can use to make decisions. But that's why I see the two kind of linked is in terms of service reliability. It's one of the best numbers you can have to help you have discussions with other people. What should we actually be doing in this situation?
When you talk about measuring something, you usually have to have a purpose for that measure, right? Is it what experience are you wanting to deliver to the customer? What does reliability mean to the customer? To your point, I think you gave last time I talked with you, gave an example of, the startup time for a movie. But if the movie stream keeps breaking every third, fourth minute, I'm probably going to get pretty tired of that. So there's some things we'll take. We're willing to accept some level of less than perfect, and others where we can take it a few times and then that's, we're done in terms of an experience.
Yeah, what was a watershed moment for me is, because I didn't invent any of these concepts. I just kind of picked up on them. And, I knew what an SLI was, what a service level indicator was, and I knew the definition of an SLO and things like that. But a real watershed moment for me was when I realized that an SLI is just what a product manager calls a user journey. And is just what someone on the business side of things calls a KPI, key performance indicator. I've even gone as far as talking to testing teams about this, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds like a transactional test to me." And I guess my point there was this great moment where I realized, holy crap, everyone at this company already kind of cares about the same thing. We've just been using different language. Mm-hmm. And once you kind of make that connection in between transactional tests or KPIs or SLIs or user journeys and realizing that we're talking about the same thing, even if it's done in slightly different ways, we may have to measure them slightly differently. I'm not saying there's a one-to-one equivalence, but they're all conceptually the same. And that's a great way to explain these concepts to other people. And that's a good way to get, to get alignment. But that just goes to your point where you're saying it's measurements. You measure for a purpose, and your purpose using SLOs and being an SRE is to measure things from the perspective of your users. What do they need?
Now, you have recently become an author with your first book. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to write the book. And if I can ask Brian, thank you, Brian, for putting that up for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I've told this story a few times, a few places now, but I love it too much and it's too true. But basically, when I started Squarespace, one of the things I was kind of asked to do as I started, they're like, SLOs, can you teach us how to SLO? And I said, sure, yeah, absolutely. But I'd only really ever experienced SLOs from like inside Google, where the tooling already existed and the culture existed, and getting started on that process externally was way more work than I thought. I thought, sure, we'll deliver our first SLOs for some of our infrastructure teams within just a few months. And then 6 months later, we had one SLO defined and just for a service on my team. And that was it. And I realized I needed to develop workshops, like 4-hour-long workshops. I needed to develop documentation. I needed, a portal on our internal wiki that collected all this stuff. I had to build tooling to help us actually calculate SLOs because most monitoring tools don't do that. More and more are if you're in the vendor space and stuff, but it's just not natively out of the box for a lot of different metric systems. So had to build tooling to actually do the math. And then we had to build a SLO template. So everyone was defining things in the same way. And then we needed a repository. So I actually wrote a little program to go discover all those templates and put that in a wiki page. Everyone could find them. And then we needed dashboards to see were we adhering to things. And then we had to alert off of error budgets. And it goes on and on and on. And it's fine. I was enjoying this work, but especially those workshops just took a lot out of me. When you're doing a 4-hour workshop once a week for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, you're saying the same thing over and over and over again, basically. I just, after one of them, I was chatting with a coworker and I was like, I'm just getting tired of this. I wish there was a book that I could point someone to so they could just go read that. And my coworker said, well, you should write the book. Thanks. And I said, no, a real expert needs to write it. And he said, you are the expert. And I just kind of, I lost it because I then realized that he may be right. I didn't want to know that, but I was now writing a book. And so that's how that kind of got started. It was just, in a way, it was a selfish way to, it started off as a selfish way to share everything I'd learned over the years in an easier manner that wasn't as taxing on me. Now, it turns out writing a book is even more taxing in many different ways. And it turns out that the number of things I learned while writing the book was actually maybe even more than I thought was going to go into the work when I first started. So it was a whole experience, but that's kind of the story of how it got started. I personally wanted one to exist, and I accidentally got tricked into being convinced that I was the one that should actually do the writing.
Yeah, it's interesting writing something down as well as you might be able, good as you might be able at explaining something. Putting that into writing that's very hard. It's kind of, how they say simple is hard. Making it understandable. I'm sure that was a journey you went through in writing your book. True.
There was so much that I learned from myself, like being forced to not just talk about things in even a 4-hour workshop, let's say, but having to write tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of words about these topics, and having to proactively ensure you're catching every potential edge case, even if that's not one you've personally actually ran into, trying to take everyone into account. The audience is now not just your coworkers who you can infer certain things about. You know what tools they have, for example, and you even know where they sit. So you can go ask them questions. Now suddenly your audience is everyone. And I learned more about SLOs, I think, while writing the book, just kind of discovery via first principle almost than maybe I knew going in. I learned so much math, so much about statistics and probability that some of my friends helped with a lot. There was more there. When I pitched the book, O'Reilly was like, okay, sure, I guess, but it should be a short one. And they pitched like a really short volume, like 100 pages or something. And I was like, I think there's more than that. And I pitched like 250 pages. And then my old coworker, Dave Renson, who's been involved with many different books, primarily he helped edit the second Google SRE book. He was helping me kind of formulate my pitch. And he was like, I think this is a 500 or 600 page book. Didn't quite end up being that big. It honestly could have. There's several chapters that we could have added that we didn't. But point is, at the end of the day, it ended up being 404 pages. So much more than I thought it was going to be. Way more than O'Reilly thought. Maybe not quite as much as what Dave thought. But yeah, there was more to say about the topic than even I thought. And I'm the one who wanted to write the book about it.
Well, tell us a little bit about the audiences you wrote this book for. I was asking you earlier about folks that are starting on a journey, folks that are into that process. Who's this book targeted at?
Anyone who cares about reliability, honestly. In some ways, I see it a natural extension of the Google SRE books. In other ways, I don't want it to be classified as just a site reliability engineering book. I use that term, I think, only 4 or 5 times in the entire book. It's definitely not couched or framed as this is for SRE, because it really can't. It can't be just one discipline, one set of people with a specific title that care about reliability and need to have better ways of measuring this reliability. You need the developing teams to be on board. You need product teams to be on board. You need leadership to be on board. And these are important lessons for anyone. You don't need someone with that title. You don't need a DevOps organization even. There's no reason why anyone providing a computer service to some kind of user, why they shouldn't care about reliability. And I think this book has lessons for just about everyone that cares about that. So yeah, it's kind of an SRE book. I'm sure it'll be purchased by more SRE types, more DevOps types than other people. But again, I very explicitly wanted it to be accessible and acceptable to anyone working in the tech industry at all. And I'd even venture that some of the lessons are applicable to people who don't work with computers at all.
Well, usually the title or the subtitle gives things away about kind of what you're about, what you're trying to say. In this case, your book title is Implementing Service Level Objectives, but the subtitle is a practical guide to SLIOs, sorry. Excuse me, I can't say it. SLIs, SLOs, and error budgets. So tell me about error budgets. We haven't talked about that.
So error budgets it's just measuring your SLO over time. So whereas an SLO gives you a target percentage, right? So like an SLI is a purposeful, meaningful measurement of your user experience. And an SLO is a target for how often you need that experience to be good for your users to be happy with you. How often can you fail? And that's kind of what an error budget is. It's the amount of time you can fail, the amount of times you can fail, depending on how you want to measure it. But it's exactly that. It's a budget of errors. It's a budget of failure. That number is generally measured over a time window. So it makes it easier to say, instead of, are we currently being 99% reliable? How reliable were we over the last 30 days? And what does that mean for us? What does it mean that in the month of September, we didn't hit our 99% target? Does that mean something's wrong? Do we need to fix stuff? Is it terrible? Is it an all hands on deck situation? Did we just incur a single black swan event and actually it's not a big deal? Is our measurement wrong? Maybe users were still happy and we were only 98% reliable, and maybe that's all we should be aiming for. But that's what an error budget is it's a measurement of your reliability over time that you can then use to kind of try to bring better focus about your work.
I'm curious, when we're just about to the top of the hour here with our time, if you reflect back when you started your journey into SRE and into SLOs, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
Well, a ton of stuff, because I'm starting to get old. So I've been doing this for a while. But I think the number one thing, honestly, is that you can overcome imposter syndrome and you can learn to be the best that you can be, even if you don't have a comp sci degree or a master's degree. Even if you go into things, I'm entirely self-taught. I studied philosophy and history and writing in college. Computers are always just a hobby for me. And let me tell you, when you start at a company like Google with literally some of the most accomplished, intelligent people on the planet, you can turn a corner and run right into someone with a Wikipedia page who invented some famous algorithm, or that can be intimidating at first, and it was for a long time, and it is for a lot of people. But I don't know how long it took for me to realize that one day I wouldn't feel that way anymore. And having known from the onset that, yeah, it might take you a while and it might take you some hard work, but knowing from the onset, Alex, you'll get there one day. One day you'll feel certain of yourself. One day other people will go to you for advice as opposed to the other way around. If I had known that somehow at the beginning of my journey 10 years ago, I think that would have been like a healing salve.
It's interesting. Even I've worked in a research environment similar to that, where if your plan is to be the smartest person in the room, you better pick a different plan. and even the experts believe that. They know they're not going to be the smartest person in the room because everybody's smart about something, right? They're all an expert in similar, maybe very different areas. So don't worry about it, right? We've all got something to contribute. Speaking of contributing, we're at the top of the hour. To get the book, we recommend that folks go to bookshop.org, right? And they can just do a search for service level objectives, find the book there. It's a great way to support your local bookshop too.
Yep. Please, buy it however you want to. To be honest, but if you can support your local bookstores, especially during this time, especially in a time of much lower foot traffic, and please do so. And bookshop.org is a great way to do that. Or just call your local bookstore and have them order it.
Great. Well, Alex Hidalgo, great to talk with you. Wish you the best at your new role at Noble 9, and thank you for everyone that joined us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mitch.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? Recruit Ops is the new way to source engineering talent. From Media Ops, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
First up on DevOps.com, we have an article that looks at security vulnerabilities and the role of vulnerability management for different types of artifacts in a CI/CD pipeline. It's a primer of sorts for organizations that perhaps have not made security part of their DevOps process, or even considered that security should be part of the DevOps process. This article covers what a security vulnerability is, some of the ways that organizations can effectively manage security vulnerabilities, and the importance of adding security practices to CI/CD processes. Also, there is an article about the importance of ML ops in making AI projects a reality. It's an interesting look at what causes so many AI projects to fail, as many as 85%. And it may not be what you think. It's not the technology that's holding AI progress back. In most cases, the barriers to businesses and organizations becoming data-driven can be reduced to three things: people, process, and culture. This article suggests that ML Ops can help enterprises see AI projects through to deployment at scale by addressing those people, process, and cultural barriers. ML Ops provides a strategy and a set of processes and best practices, a technological backbone, so to speak, for managing and scaling machine learning-based services through automation. It also provides for seamless collaboration between the data science teams that are responsible for generating models with the teams that are accountable for running the services in production environments. It's good stuff, and it's totally worthwhile if your organization is one of the 85% whose AI project is on the road to failure. And in the run-up to the Predict 2021 virtual summit happening this week, we have a conversation between Jim Rose, who is the CEO of Circle CI, and Rebecca August, who is the Director of Marketing here at Media Ops. And they have a discussion about what 2021 has in store for DevOps and CI/CD, how the pandemic has impacted software teams, and what they can do to succeed in this new year. Predict 2021 is happening starting January 21, and it's a 2-day event featuring a plethora of speakers on a number of topics, ranging from cybersecurity to cloud native to DevOps and beyond. I'm looking forward to hearing what the collective brainpower will be sharing. These are some people with their feet on the ground and closest to the action, so they all have unique insight into what we can expect this year. I encourage you to join us this week for what is sure to be an event well worth your while. All right, over on Container Journal, Nutanix has added support for Anthos, a managed instance of its Kubernetes environment, to its hyper-converged infrastructure platform running on the company's AHV hypervisor. Google launched Anthos last year as part of an effort to extend its Kubernetes reach to on-premises IT environments, as well as other cloud computing platforms. Since then, it has gained traction in on-premises IT environments as organizations look to extend the reach of their investments in the Google Kubernetes Engine service. As such, Nutanix is committed to making Anthos available alongside its own distribution of Kubernetes, which it has dubbed Carbon. Also, we have news of Accurix, which is employing policy as code to address a Kubernetes vulnerability using its Terrascan tool for securing infrastructure as code. Terrascan is Accurix's open-source static code analysis tool that allows developers to build infrastructure as code. The vulnerability in question is CVE 2020-8555, which, if left unpatched, enables cybercriminals to exploit a server-side request forgery vulnerability to allow the attacker to use the kube controller manager to make get or post requests. To mitigate the threat, IT teams must prevent untrusted users from creating pods that mount volume types such as Gluster FS, Quobyte, Storage OS, and Scale IO. then restrict write permissions for storage class. That's a mouthful. Accurix has simplified remediation of the issue by adding a security policy as code that leverages open source policy agents software developed under the auspices of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we have an article that looks at the challenges in managing identities and entitlements to secure the public cloud. The push to digital transformation in response to the COVID-19 pandemic has literally blurred the lines between the public cloud and the internal network, which creates a much more complex environment that organizations are still struggling to secure. One particularly troublesome area is managing identities and entitlements. Identity management used to be a relatively easy process, but it's been complicated by the numerous cloud applications that are available today. But a new trend is emerging that attempts to tie entitlements and identities together, managing them with policies and constant audits. It's an interesting take on managing what has become silos of environments because of all these cloud applications, and reducing the overhead that process has created. All right, that's all that I have for today's headlines. Please check back on Thursday when I'll have a fresh batch for you. Until then, have a great day and stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Katie Griotti, who is the Associate Director of Certification for the Security Industry Association. Katie, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm loving this opportunity. Thank you for having me.
Oh, great. So I'm interested in finding out what's up with you guys, the Security Industry Association, and specifically what you guys are doing in kind of the mentorship space. I know that you just came out with the Talent Inclusion Mentorship Education Program. So I'd love to hear about that. And then we could talk a little bit more about trends in kind of the ongoing continuing education sector, if you will, in cybersecurity. But first, why don't you tell me a little bit about SIA and then tell me about the TIME program?
Of course. So the Security Industry Association is, of course, an association, a trade association that represents the physical security industry, as well as the cyber, since everything is coming together all into one more and more these days. So with the mentorship program, we are aiming to be as inclusive as possible in the industry. We want to see somebody that represents every identity, whether that be race, religion, preference, however you want to look at that. We want that to be represented when you walk into a trade show. So the goal is to have all of these wonderful, experienced security professionals come in and assist with giving leadership skills and creating connections with the diverse population of young professionals that we're seeing. And our RISE program, which sponsors the TIME program, the TIME mentorship program, we're about 800 strong. And diversity within the program is astounding. It's not what you're used to seeing. And so we really want to capitalize on the opportunity to make sure that these individuals are making security a career.
So, it's interesting that you say, it's not what you would expect as far as, the makeup of your members in your membership ranks, because obviously when you think about security, especially cybersecurity, you kind of think of these guys in hoodies, and, they're sitting in basements or whatever, and they're hacking and they're doing their thing. But you're saying that there's a growing number of, females in cybersecurity, or people of different nationalities, or how would you kind of describe the makeup these days?
Well, the young professional group it's all over the place. We're almost seeing equal numbers of women in our young professionals group as men, which is great. Definitely different than what we've seen before. But we're also seeing a lot of people of color, which is wonderful, because there's something to learn from every single person in the industry. And I think diversifying amongst the ranks is what's going to help advance it. So it's become part of SIA's mission and RISE to really ensure that is the representation that the industry is putting forward.
So is this the first mentorship of its kind that SIA has, or SIA has initiated before, or have you guys had other mentorship programs?
This is the first formalized mentorship program that SIA has done. Now, there are other organizations such as ASIS or ASIS that have had formal mentorship programs, but this is the first of its kind for SIA. We are definitely, it was the time. You can see, I mean, the social movement and everything like that. We want to make sure that our organization and the industry are moving forward and doing what's best. And this is our way of really trying to do that.
Excellent. So how are you hooking up folks within the mentorship program? I mean, do you have, is it just kind of like, throw a name in a hat, basically, and it's like, hey, you get this person, and hey, you get that person, or how are you guys going about doing that?
As interesting as that would be, we are.
Can you imagine?
We'd probably get complaints, but we just put out a call for mentors. So first and foremost, we want to see which industry professionals, and they can be young professionals, young professionals for us is 40 and under. So you could have spent a solid 10 or 15 years in the industry and still be a young professional. But any industry professional that's interested, you fill out our application form. And from that, we also have a headshot. And what we're going to do is we put that on the website, and it's going to allow for mentees. And the first call for mentees will be in February. But they're going to be able to scroll through the profiles and see their hobbies, their work ethic, what area of the industry they're working in, and their specialties. And based on that, they are going to be able to give us a top 3 of their choice, which is going to obviously assist us in the matching process. But mentorship programs are hands down more successful when the mentee feels like they have a say in who they get matched with. So that was a major priority for us. Interesting.
Okay, so our geographic regions, anything like that, is that part of the kind of, I don't want to say criteria, but is that kind of part of the matching process that you guys kind of maybe create a funnel, if you will, of potential mentors and mentees that, based on, certain criteria such as geographic regions?
It's definitely an option. So when we ask the mentors, they provide their geographic area as well as their preferred mode of communication with their mentee. And of course, right now that's kind of limited. They can't really go meet in person very, very willingly. And we wouldn't want that either, but it is an option. And then on the mentee side, we get to say, what is your ideal mentor? And if they say somebody in the Great Lakes region, somebody in the DMV, that can assist us in making sure that when the time comes, they're able to go meet them in person and really create that connection that we want.
Okay. All right, great. So what ultimately do you guys hope to achieve with this, with the mentorship program and creating something that is as diverse as hopefully it is?
Ultimately, we would love to see diversity amongst the ranks in management within these large companies, within smaller companies. We just want to make sure that the effort for representation is being made. And we'd also like to create a long-lasting community. We want there to be communication between the newbie and somebody who is middle, upper management. And then hopefully those who are mentored come back and be our mentors, so that this can be something that really filters through the industry.
That's great. I really like the idea of a mentorship program to begin with, but having perhaps folks who have been in the industry for a while hooking up with perhaps people who they might not have associated with in the past, just because of the profile, the stereotype or stereotypical security person. Maybe they would not have socialized with a particular person unless they absolutely had to. So having this mentorship person, I would imagine, is definitely an educational experience for both the mentee and the mentor. So I think you guys are doing some great stuff. Let's circle back in, 6, 8 months, 9 months. Let's talk about it again, see how things are going, since it sounds like you guys are just getting the wheels off the ground right now.
We would love that. And our first term, like the first mentoring term, will begin in May. So the matching process will begin right after the new year. So we're very excited.
Excellent. Well, if folks are interested in taking part either as a mentor or a mentee, is there still time for them to get involved?
Oh, absolutely. So the cutoff for the mentor applications is mid-January. And then we'll open up the mentee applications mid-February.
Okay.
So that we have time to get our matching situated by May.
And are there any particular requirements to be a mentee?
To be a mentee, no. To be a mentor, we would prefer you be a SIA member, but we want to welcome all people in the industry to become mentees. The whole point of the program is inclusion. We want to see you stay in this field.
What about high schoolers or folks who are just, really, really young, but are super, super interested in the security sector? I mean, would you even go as far as to open it up to them as well? Or would you prefer that people already be in the industry or just starting out in the industry?
We've absolutely considered those options. And that is something we will probably integrate into the program after the first year, just so that we can learn from our first year and where we can build. But SIA has an incredible outreach program through what they call FAST. And so we're doing college outreach, high school outreach, HBCU outreach. Okay. So we are definitely making it an effort to make it so that there is a pipeline from high school to college to young professionals. It's definitely a mission for SIA, and we would love to make it so that the mentorship program reaches them as well.
Excellent. Well, Katie, thanks for taking the time and walking me through it. I wish you guys the best of luck with this program. I think it's a great idea, and I think it's going to be very well received in the industry, especially to your point, as we see more diversity and inclusiveness in the security sector. I know that anything that is going to make all populations of cybersecurity professionals feel more involved and more engaged with the community at large, I know it's going to be a winner. So thanks again. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here with the webinars preview for Tuesday, January 19th. As always, we have a number of webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, and Container Journal. I wanted to let you know about 3 that are happening very, very soon in the hopes that you can set your calendar and join us. The first one is happening on DevOps.com. It is called Shift Left with NGINX Layer 7 Security. It is happening today, or should I say tonight, actually. It's happening tonight at January 19th at 10 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by NGINX, which is part of F5. So I'm actually moderating this webinar, so I hope everybody can stay up and watch the webinar with me. We're going to take a look at security from the DevOps in the DevOps process, including some of the best practices to defend web and layer 7 applications against many, many different application attacks, such as XSS, SQL injections, threat campaigns, and others. How to identify and stop untrusted bots that help malicious actors automate their attacks. What the concept of security as code is to help security shift left by integrating into application development CI/CD pipelines, and how to gain insight of overall security posture of your organization. It's going to be a good one. The next webinar is happening Wednesday, January 20th at 11 a.m. This is the latest installment of our DevOps Unbound series. It's called Avoiding SolarWinds-like Threats, the impact across DevOps teams. And it is happening Wednesday, January 20th at 11 a.m., as I said, on DevOps.com. This is actually going to be an all-star panel featuring Dr. Chen-Si Wang of Rain Capital, Julian Waits of Devo, Bhavin Patel of Tricentis, and Richard Stainen of IT Harvest. They're going to be joined by Alan Schimmel and Mitchell Ashley of ASG, Accelerated Strategies Group, and they're going to explore some questions, including are supply chain attacks likely to become commonplace? How should CISOs, cybersecurity organizations, and application delivery professionals prepare themselves to plan for and respond to supply chain attacks? What some long-standing assumptions or decisions must be challenged and reassessed? And will suppliers be required to disclose or validate supply chain security measures due to contractual requirements or potential future government regulation? It's going to be a really, really interesting conversation. So I highly recommend, if you've got the time, please join us for that webinar. Again, that one is happening Wednesday, January 20th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. Okay, the final one today is called 2021 Open Source Governance Top 10 Trends and Predictions, happening Wednesday at 1 p.m., January 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's sponsored by Revenera. During this webinar, Alex Ryback, who is the Director of Product Management at Revenera, and Russ Ealing, who is the founder and CEO of OSS Engineering Consultants, share their top 10 open source usage, license compliance, and security insights for 2021. They're going to explore some topics, including where the adoption of shift left is headed and the decisions organizations will face moving forward, the impact of a lack of software developer security training relative to pandemic fallout, the broader role of the engineering team in open source management and governance, and the expanding role and impact of open source marketplaces such as GitHub. There'll be more as well. Lots of really, really great stuff that will be covered in this webinar. So definitely, if you can, please check out that webinar. All right, that's it for today's webinar preview. Check back on Thursday when I'll have a fresh batch for you. Until then, stay safe. All right, rounding out today's TechStrong TV is a conversation with Mitch Ashley of ASG in his Analyst Corner segment. He discusses the combined role of the CTO, CIO, and CISO in the era of low code and no code. So let's give this a listen.
Hi, welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. Now, I always introduce myself when I do an Analyst Corner for TechStrong TV. I introduce myself that way as CEO of Accelerated Strategies Group, which is a joint venture started last year, beginning of 2020, between myself and Alan Schimmel, Media Ops. And been a lot of fun. We've really made a great impact in 1 year already. I'm very pleased with the performance of the company and the opportunities that we've had to work with some really great customers, both in the supplier vendor side of things and, of course, in the practitioner part of the business. Now, recently, I added another role to my my title, if you will, actually to my work is what really is impactful from it. And that's as CTO of Media Ops. Media Ops is DevOps.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard, et cetera. And it's actually a nice combination because I've always been a believer of I want to work with the technologies that I talk about. And in most cases, I get an opportunity to do that. Not always. I can't get an opportunity to work with everything, of course. But I do like to kind of follow the principle of not ask people to do something you haven't done yourself before, or at least know a little bit about it. And that's usually why in the holiday periods, I will take a new technology or an area of interest, and I'll take at least a couple of weeks, sometimes more, and just plow myself into that, kind of learn about that. And I remember doing this back from, I think it was John Scully actually did this when he was CEO of Apple. This is, back in the day before when Apple was getting ready to kind of hit the skids and not sure if it was going to survive. But he did this practice of during kind of off times, he would take a sabbatical, much longer than a couple of weeks. But I remember reading an article about him doing that and learning photography, going and essentially living with a professional photographer, learning all about it, and really developing a new hobby, a new interest. So I took that and made my own version of it. And, I did that for doing software development on the Mac and Apple Watch development, iPhone development, just because I happen to be a Mac user. Just different technologies that I'm going to learn Python or whatever it might be way back when. So it's nice to be being that practitioner again. And one of the things that I enjoy about it, the strategy we have with Media Ops is very much a low-code, no-code kind of strategy. It's a very nimble, fast-paced company, growing, doing really well. And in my role as CTO there, I oversee all the technologies that we use, whether it be collaboration tools to, the web platforms and delivery platforms that we have behind it, all kinds of good things. So it's a great chance to kind of practice what I preach. And it's nice to be able to really apply as much as I can the low code, no code philosophy. So sometimes there's unintended consequences of things that you do. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not good. This happens to be a good one. But it reminded me of reading a Washington Post article over the weekend that during the COVID era, podiatrists have seen a huge increase in foot problems, mostly broken toes, from people being at home, walking around, bumping into furniture because you're just there more. And also because you move furniture around to, set up offices and accommodate people being there so much more during the day. And of course, that's not a great consequence, unintended consequence, but it is one. And in the case of, my role at Media Ops, it is a positive one. And you just don't know. You don't know what life is going to bring you and what opportunities are going to come your way. Not that you do them all, but I'm a believer of you do good things and good things will happen. You help people, and whether good things happen for you, at least they'll happen for them. And once in a while that comes around, kind of the universe pays you back. So I just want to share that a little bit as I'm talking to you. I've spent my career maybe 50-50 on the product side, whether it be security or SaaS or cloud or early internet software networks. And on the other side, being a practitioner, CIO. I guess the last CIO job that I had was, early 2010 to 15, so 5 years or so. And now I'm kind of back and having the dual role actually at the same time instead of one or the other. So it's not unlike being in a product company where you're CTO, but you're really CTO, CIO, CISO. And that's very much true in this case. So I'm learning right along with you and applying many of the things that we're talking about here, sometimes more directly, but at least we have an opportunity to kind of keep our hands in the pie if you're interested in and working alongside with you. So I hope that'll give me some new insights or ideas or maybe questions to share with you as part of the Analyst Corner. And as we work with our customers, because I'm still running the analyst business as well, which means you'll see a lot more things from other Accelerated Strategies Group analysts being produced in addition to the work that I've done prior. So thank you for listening. We appreciate you tuning in. And I look forward to sharing more with you over time. Thanks to all the folks on LinkedIn who reached out and said congratulations. I always appreciate having new folks join and reconnecting with some old friends. And that's happened too. So it's great to be part of this network. So have a good day and we'll talk to you again soon.
I'm back, baby. You know who I am. And if you don't, you can kiss my shiny metal ass. Yeah, 2020 has been a jerk of a year, but thanks to Mom, us robots are immune from COVID. But what about 2021? What it does hold in store for DevOps, digital transformation, cyber, and cloud native. We have assembled an out-of-this-world cast using the latest artificial intelligence to cue you in. Predict 2021. This great virtual event is happening on January 21st and 22nd, 5 hours a day. Check out the great speaker lineup and register for free at predict2021.com. There will be great prizes, exhibits, interactive moments, picture booths, and maybe even a chance to win a drink with a robot. It's all free if you register now. Go to predict2021.com for all the info. Don't be a jerkwad. I'll see you at Predict 2021.
All right, everybody, that wraps another episode of TechStrong TV. I am so glad you had the time to sit and watch the interviews today and join us for what I thought was an amazing lineup of interviews, and I hope you got as much out of it as I did. We'll have another fresh episode for you on Thursday, which is also the first day of our Predict 2021 Virtual Summit. So if you have not signed up yet for it, please do. Just go to predict2021.com and you can take a look at the agenda and register there. Until then, until Thursday, I hope everybody has a great rest of the week, and I just want you all to stay safe.